Hello everyone, and welcome back to Midnight Horror. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Story 1. The underground parking garage was nearly empty, the dim fluorescent lights casting long, flickering shadows along the concrete walls. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to my car, the only sound in the vast, silent space. It had been a long day, and I was eager to get home, but as I reached my vehicle, something caught my eye. A set of keys lay on the ground next to my driver's side door, gleaming dully under the pale lights. I hesitated, glancing around the garage. There were only a few other cars parked in the distance, their dark silhouettes barely visible in the gloom. No one else seemed to be around, and I hadn't noticed anyone coming in or out. I crouched down to pick up the keys, curiosity creeping in. Just as my fingers brushed the cold metal, I heard a rustling noise behind me. A chill ran up my spine as I froze in place. The sound had been subtle, but unmistakable, something shifting, something moving in the silence. My breath caught as I slowly turned my head, scanning the rows of concrete pillars and dimly lit parking spaces. There was nothing but stillness, the same eerie emptiness that had been there moments before. I straightened, gripping the keys in my hand as I glanced around again. Maybe it was just a stray piece of paper blowing across the floor, or my own movements echoing in the cavernous space. But something about the noise felt deliberate, like someone was there, waiting, watching. My pulse quickened as I unlocked my car and reached for the door handle, my other hand still gripping the unfamiliar keys. Before I could get inside, another sound broke the silence, a faint scraping noise like a shoe dragging against the concrete. It was closer this time, too close to ignore. My muscles tensed as I turned sharply, my eyes scanning the dark corners of the garage. The lights overhead buzzed softly, their glow weak and uneven, casting just enough illumination to deepen the shadows. I saw nothing. No movement, no shifting figures lurking between the cars. But I felt something, an unease settling in the pit of my stomach, the undeniable sensation of being watched. My grip tightened on the keys, and I took a cautious step toward the back of my car, peering around as if expecting someone to lunge out from the darkness. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Taking a deep breath, I shook off the unease and quickly pulled open my car door. Just as I slid into the driver's seat, something moved at the edge of my vision. A shadow, a brief, fleeting movement behind the nearest concrete pillar. My blood ran cold. I slammed the door shut and locked it instantly, my hands trembling as I fumbled to start the engine. The headlights illuminated the empty stretch of concrete ahead, but my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the darkness behind me. Nothing. No one. My pulse pounded in my ears as I forced myself to breathe, trying to steady my shaking hands. It had to be my imagination, just paranoia getting the best of me. But the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I put the car in reverse, glancing over my shoulder as I backed out of the space. As my taillights swept across the garage, I caught movement again, a figure slipping behind a row of parked cars, just out of reach of the light. My breath hitched, and I pressed the gas pedal harder, my heart hammering against my ribs. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to approach me. They were hiding. As I sped toward the exit, my mind raced with questions. Who had dropped the keys next to my car? Had they been left there on purpose? A trap to make me stop and lower my guard. My skin prickled at the thought. If I hadn't heard that rustling noise, would I have noticed someone sneaking up behind me? I reached the ramp leading to the street level, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. The dim yellow light of the garage gave way to the cool darkness of the night as I emerged onto the quiet street. I didn't slow down until I was several blocks away, my breath finally starting to even out. The city lights shimmered ahead, familiar and safe, but the unease still clung to me. I pulled over at a red light and looked down at the keys still clutched in my hand. They were ordinary enough, just a basic keyring with a few keys and a small plastic fob. But they didn't belong to me. Someone had left them there, right beside my door, as if expecting me to find them. My stomach twisted at the thought. I glanced around the empty intersection, my paranoia refusing to fade. Then, with a surge of unease, I made a decision. Rolling down my window, I tossed the keys onto the pavement and sped off as soon as the light turned green. I didn't want them in my car. I didn't want any part of whatever had just happened. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me and double-checked the deadbolt, my nerves still frayed. I told myself it had been nothing, a coincidence, a trick of the mind. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there in that garage, waiting in the shadows. And worse, I couldn't stop wondering if they had followed me home. Story 2. I pulled into the gas station, the only one open this late. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold glow over the empty lot. The place was nearly deserted except for a single car parked near the convenience store. I kept my doors locked as I stepped out to pump gas, glancing around every few seconds. The quiet felt unnatural, almost suffocating. As I stood there, waiting for the tank to fill, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. A man was approaching from the other side of the lot, walking at a steady but deliberate pace. He was holding something in his hand, and before I could react, he knocked on my passenger window. I jumped, my pulse spiking as I turned to face him. His expression was neutral, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood so still. "I think you dropped this," he said, holding up a phone. His voice was calm, almost too casual. I frowned, barely glancing at the device. It wasn't mine. My phone was sitting safely in the cup holder, where I had left it before getting out. I didn't respond right away, hoping he would take the hint and walk away. Instead, he tapped on the glass again, more insistently this time. "That's not mine," I said through the closed window, shaking my head. His eyes flicked toward my lap, where my real phone was visible. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Are you sure? It was right by your car." His voice had a forced friendliness to it, like he was trying too hard to sound harmless. Something about the situation felt off, and my instinct screamed at me to stay put. I shook my head again, gripping the steering wheel with one hand. "No, it's not mine," I repeated, a little firmer this time. He stood there for a few seconds, his eyes locked on mine. Then, without another word, he turned and started walking away. But instead of heading toward the store or another pump, he moved toward the darkened edge of the lot, where the overhead lights didn't quite reach. My stomach twisted as I watched him disappear into the shadows. I locked my doors immediately, my hands shaky as I finished pumping gas. The uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Something wasn't right. I kept scanning the lot, expecting the man to reappear. The longer I sat there, the more paranoid I became. Why would someone try to return a phone that wasn't mine? And why had he left so abruptly? Deciding not to linger, I put the nozzle back and got into my car. As I started the engine, my headlights swept across the lot, illuminating the spot where he had vanished. The space was empty. I exhaled shakily and put the car into drive. Just as I was about to pull onto the road, something caught my eye. The phone. It was now sitting on the curb near the gas pump, as if it had been placed there deliberately. I hadn't seen him drop it. My chest tightened as I stared at it, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Was it a trick? A setup? Every instinct told me to leave, but curiosity gnawed at me. I hesitated, then reached for my own phone to snap a picture of the mysterious device. Just as I raised my camera, my phone screen lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. My heart jumped, and for a second, I debated whether to answer. Something told me I shouldn't. I declined the call, my fingers unsteady. The moment I did, the other phone, the one on the curb, lit up too. A chill ran down my spine as I watched its screen glow in the darkness. Someone was controlling it. My pulse pounded in my ears as I threw my car into gear and sped out of the lot. I didn't care about the speed limit or the fact that my exit was reckless. I just needed to get away. As I turned onto the highway, I checked my mirrors, half expecting to see headlights following me. The road was empty, but the unease clung to me like a second skin. My phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. I ignored it, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I just needed to get home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my nerves were raw. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed once more, and against my better judgment, I checked the message that had just come through. It was a single text. "Why did you leave so fast?" My blood turned to ice. I didn't reply. I didn't even move. I just stared at the screen, my body frozen with fear. My mind raced through possibilities. Had he taken my license plate number? Was he nearby? I forced myself to lock my doors, my hands shaking as I double-checked my surroundings. I knew I should call someone, but what would I even say? That a man tried to return a phone that wasn't mine and then disappeared. That I was getting strange calls and texts. It sounded like paranoia, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. I made sure all my doors were locked before heading inside, every creak of the house making me flinch. I tried to shake the feeling of being watched, but it lingered. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time my phone vibrated, I jumped, refusing to look at the screen. By morning, the calls had stopped, but the unease remained. I thought about reporting the incident to the police, but what would they even do? There was no crime, no clear threat, just a man, a phone, and a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Days passed, and I tried to move on, convincing myself it was just a weird encounter. But then, a week later, a package arrived at my door. No return address, no markings, just a small box sitting on my porch. Inside was a phone, the same one from the gas station. Story 3. The bus stop was nearly empty when I arrived, just an older woman scrolling through her phone a few seats down. The evening air was crisp, and the sky had darkened to a deep blue. The street lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, shivering slightly as I checked my phone for the bus schedule. A few minutes later, a man sat down beside me, closer than necessary despite the empty space around us. I stiffened, my grip tightening on my phone as I shifted slightly away. He smelled of stale sweat and cigarettes, his presence immediately setting me on edge. I avoided looking directly at him, hoping he wouldn't start a conversation. Then, without warning, he turned his head slightly and spoke. "I followed you last week, but you were too fast." His voice was calm, almost amused, as if we were discussing the weather. My heart stopped for a second before pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stared straight ahead, my mind racing as I tried to process his words. I forced myself to stay still, not wanting to give away my fear. My thoughts scrambled, trying to recall anything from the past week that could explain what he meant. Had I seen him before? Had I noticed someone following me? Nothing came to mind, but the idea sent a chill down my spine. Slowly, I turned my head just enough to glance at him. He looked unremarkable, mid-40s, unshaven, wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. His eyes were focused on me, studying my reaction with unsettling interest. My throat was dry as I forced out a response. "I think you have the wrong person." My voice was steady, but inside, panic was clawing its way up my chest. He let out a short chuckle, shaking his head. "No, it was you," he said confidently. "You take this bus a lot. I've seen you before." My stomach twisted, and I gripped the edge of the bench, resisting the urge to stand up and run. Every instinct told me to get away from him, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself or make him angry. I glanced down the road, willing the bus to appear, but the street was empty. The older woman who had been sitting a few seats away was now gone, leaving us alone. The air around me felt suffocating as I calculated my options. If I got up and walked away, would he follow me? If I stayed, how much more would he say? He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. "You walk fast," he continued, as if we were old friends reminiscing. "Last week, I tried to keep up, but you turned a corner, and I lost you." My skin crawled as the words sank in. This wasn't just some random creepy remark. He had actually followed me, watched me, and I had never even noticed. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice quieter this time. I reached into my pocket, gripping my phone tightly, ready to call someone, anyone. The bus stop suddenly felt too exposed, too open. I wished I had driven instead of taking public transit. He ignored my denial, tilting his head slightly. "You always wear that same jacket," he noted, his eyes drifting down to my clothes. "And those shoes. You should switch it up." His voice carried an unsettling edge, like he was offering friendly advice rather than making my skin crawl. My breath hitched, and I forced myself to breathe evenly. A car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the bus stop. I considered flagging it down, pretending I knew the driver, but it sped by without slowing. My hands felt clammy as I gripped my phone harder. I couldn't just sit here. I needed to do something. I stood abruptly, keeping my phone in hand. "I forgot something," I said quickly, stepping away from the bench. I didn't wait for a response before I started walking, my legs stiff but purposeful. I headed toward a nearby convenience store, hoping to get inside before he followed. My heart pounded with each step, expecting to hear him get up behind me. But he didn't. He remained seated, watching me. I could feel his eyes on my back, that eerie smirk still playing on his lips. I reached the store and pulled open the door, stepping inside as the warm fluorescent lights washed over me. The door chimed, and I turned just in time to see him still sitting there, unmoving. I exhaled shakily, moving toward the back of the store. My hands trembled as I pretended to browse the shelves, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced with what to do next. Should I call someone? Tell the clerk? I didn't even know his name, didn't know if reporting him would do any good. I peeked out the window, watching the bus stop from a distance. He was still there, sitting exactly as I had left him. But now he was looking at his phone. A horrible thought crossed my mind. Was he taking pictures of me? I turned away quickly, feeling nauseous. My skin burned with unease, every nerve in my body on edge. Minutes passed, and the bus finally arrived. I watched as a few people got on, and for a brief moment, I thought he might leave. But he didn't. He remained on the bench, letting the bus go without even glancing at it. My stomach twisted. He wasn't waiting for the bus, he had just been waiting for me. I stayed inside the store, pretending to browse until I was sure he was gone. It took nearly half an hour, but eventually he stood, stretched, and casually walked away as if nothing had happened. I waited another few minutes before stepping outside, looking in every direction before heading home. That night, I double-checked that my doors and windows were locked. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. I had never seen him before, but he had seen me. He had followed me. And the worst part was, I had no idea if or when he would do it again. Story 4. I arrived home late, the hallway dimly lit by the flickering overhead lights. As I reached my apartment door, I immediately noticed something was off. The door was slightly ajar, the deadbolt not engaged. I knew for a fact I had locked it before leaving. My heart began to pound as I hesitated in front of the door. I considered calling someone, but who? The police wouldn't come if nothing was stolen, and I had no proof anyone was still inside. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open slowly, my eyes scanning the dark interior. Everything looked normal at first glance. My keys clinked as I set them down on the counter, my movements cautious. I reached for the light switch, hesitating before finally flipping it on. The apartment was exactly as I had left it, except for one thing. The TV remote was on the couch instead of the table. A chill ran through me as I stared at it. It wasn't something I would have overlooked. I always left it on the table, a habit I never broke. The sight of it sitting on the couch sent a strange, creeping unease through my body. I slowly walked over, picking it up and turning it over in my hands. It looked normal, no scratches, no signs of tampering. But someone had moved it. That meant someone had been inside. I turned, scanning the room, my pulse quickening. If nothing was missing, what had they been looking for? I moved cautiously toward the bedroom, my breathing shallow. The door was slightly open, just as I had left it. I peeked inside, my eyes darting over the furniture. Nothing looked disturbed, no drawers open, no clothes strewn about, but the feeling of intrusion lingered. I checked the closet, pushing aside jackets and shoes, half expecting to see someone crouched in the shadows. Nothing. I opened the bathroom door quickly. My reflection in the mirror startled me before I confirmed I was alone. The apartment was empty, yet the eerie sensation remained. Returning to the living room, I sat down, my mind racing. Why would someone break in just to move a remote? Had they taken something small, something I wouldn't notice right away? I glanced at my bookshelves, my desk, the few personal items scattered throughout the room. Everything seemed intact. I checked the locks again, testing them one by one. They worked fine. Whoever had entered hadn't forced their way in. Did I forget to lock it? No, I was certain I had. I always double-checked before leaving. Someone had entered with a key. But who? I thought about the possibilities. The landlord. Maintenance. But they usually left notices before coming in, and nothing had been scheduled. A former tenant. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. What if someone still had a copy of my key? The silence of the apartment felt heavier now. Every creak of the walls, every distant noise from the hallway made me tense. I glanced at the remote again, still in my hands. It was such a small thing, yet it felt like a message. A sign that someone had been here and they had wanted me to know. I stood up abruptly, grabbing my phone. I needed to do something. Anything to shake the unease settling in my chest. I checked my call log, wondering if I should text a friend. Instead, I found myself dialing my building manager's number. He answered after a few rings, his voice groggy. "Yeah?" "Hey, it's me from 4 billion. Did anyone enter my apartment today?" My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Not that I know of." Maintenance wasn't scheduled for anything. Why? I hesitated, then exhaled slowly. I think someone was inside. Nothing's missing, but my door was unlocked when I got home. I didn't mention the remote. It felt too small, too ridiculous to say out loud. You sure you locked it when you left? Yes, I always do. Another pause. I can check the security footage for the hall if you want. Relief flooded through me. Yeah, that would help. I'll call you if I see anything. Hanging up, I sat back down, staring at the door. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. The idea that someone had been inside my space, walking around, touching things, made my skin crawl. An hour passed before my phone buzzed. It was the building manager. I answered quickly. Did you see anything? He hesitated. Yeah, someone was outside your door around noon. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Did they go inside? Yeah, used a key. Stayed for maybe 5 minutes, then left. My grip on the phone tightened. Did you see their face? Not really. They kept their head down. Hoodie, jeans, could be anyone. A cold fear settled into my chest. Did they go into any other apartments? No, just yours. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Do you have any idea who it could be? A pause. Then, I don't know. But I'd change your locks. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah. First thing tomorrow. After hanging up, I sat in the silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. Someone had come in, spent a few minutes, moved the remote, and left. Why? Just to let me know they could? Just to mess with me? Or was there something else? I checked every corner of the apartment again, every cabinet, every drawer. Still nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place except that one small detail. It felt like a warning, a whisper in the dark that said, I was here. I barely slept that night, my ears tuned to every sound. The next morning, I had the locks changed, double-checking each new key. I told myself it was over, that it was just a fluke. But even now, every time I come home, I check the door twice before going inside. I check the remote too, and if it's ever out of place again, I know I won't be staying. Story 5. I woke up groggy, the faint glow of my phone screen illuminating the dark room as I reached for it. It was just past 7 in the morning, and I was already dreading the start of the day. The night had felt restless, though I couldn't remember why. Something had woken me in the middle of the night, but in my half-asleep state, I had ignored it and rolled over. As I sat up, I decided to check my security camera footage out of habit. Living alone made me cautious, and I liked to make sure nothing strange had happened overnight. I scrolled through the timeline, watching as nothing but an occasional passing car showed up on the screen. Then, as I neared the middle of the night, something made me stop. At 3:37 a.m., a man appeared on the screen, standing outside my window. He was still, his face partially obscured by the shadow cast from the house. My stomach twisted as I watched him remain motionless, staring into my window. He didn't move, didn't shift, just stood there like he was waiting for something. I hit pause, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts as I tried to process what I was seeing. I lived on a quiet street with little foot traffic, especially at that hour. There was no reason for anyone to be standing outside my window at that time of night. A wave of unease settled over me as I forced myself to press play again. For several minutes, the man didn't move. His posture was rigid, his head tilted slightly as if he was peering into the darkness of my bedroom. I couldn't see his face clearly, but something about his stance unsettled me. It wasn't the casual curiosity of a passerby. It was deliberate. Then, without warning, he shifted. His head turned slightly, as if he was looking at something inside my room. My blood ran cold as I tried to remember if I had moved in my sleep at that moment. Had he seen me? Was that why he had stayed so long? At 3:41 a.m., the man finally took a step back. He lingered for a moment longer, then with an eerie slowness, turned and walked away. I watched as he disappeared down the street, his form swallowed by the darkness. There was no urgency in his departure, no hesitation. It was as if he had gotten what he came for. I sat frozen, my hands gripping my phone tightly as I replayed the footage. I needed to convince myself I had imagined something sinister in his behavior. Maybe it was just some drunk guy who had wandered too close to my house. But deep down I knew that wasn't the case. I checked the rest of the footage, but the man never returned. Still, the uneasy feeling in my gut didn't fade. I had slept through all of it, completely unaware that just outside my window, someone had been watching me. A shiver ran down my spine as I forced myself to breathe. I debated what to do next. Calling the police felt pointless. He hadn't actually done anything. But the idea of simply ignoring it felt worse. My mind raced with possibilities. Had he been watching me for longer than just that night? Would he come back? The thought made my stomach twist uncomfortably. I got up and checked the locks on my doors and windows, even though I knew they were secure. Everything was as it should be, but that didn't comfort me. I peered outside, scanning the street for anything unusual, but there was nothing. Just the quiet stillness of the morning. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through my usual routine, but my mind remained stuck on the footage. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him standing there, unmoving, staring. The thought of going to sleep that night made my skin crawl. As the sun set, I double-checked the security camera feed, watching as the sky darkened outside. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep without knowing if he returned. Hours passed and nothing happened. I forced myself to relax, telling myself it had been a one-time thing. By 2 a.m., my exhaustion began to win. My eyes were heavy, and I knew I needed to sleep. I left my phone on my nightstand, security feed open just in case I needed to check it quickly. But just as I was about to close my eyes, a notification popped up. Motion detected. My breath caught in my throat as I grabbed my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. I hesitated before opening the app, part of me not wanting to see what was waiting for me. But I had to know. The footage loaded, and my stomach dropped. He was back, standing in the exact same spot as before. This time, he wasn't just standing still, he was moving slightly, shifting from one foot to the other, as if he was impatient. I felt my pulse hammer against my ribs as I watched him raise a hand, pressing it lightly against the glass. My breath caught in my throat. He knew I was watching. I scrambled out of bed, my fingers fumbling as I dialed 911. My voice shook as I told the dispatcher what was happening. She assured me officers were on their way, but every second that passed felt unbearable. I kept my eyes on the screen, watching the man outside my window. As if sensing what I was doing, he suddenly took a step back. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something, then slowly walked away. The fear in my chest tightened, knowing he had left on his own before the police even arrived. When the officers finally showed up, they searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area more frequently. But as they left, I knew it wasn't over. For the next several nights, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump. Every flicker of movement sent my heart racing. I checked the cameras obsessively, but he didn't come back. At least not where I could see him. I started closing my curtains at night, but it didn't help. The fear was already in my mind, deep-rooted, impossible to shake. I didn't know if he had been watching me for one night or many. I didn't know if he would return. The worst part wasn't seeing him on the camera. It was knowing that for all the nights before, I hadn't been watching. Story 6. Walking my dog at night had become a peaceful routine. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sounds coming from distant cars and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. I liked the solitude, the way the dim streetlights cast long shadows along the sidewalks. My dog trotted ahead, his leash loose in my hand as we made our way down the familiar path. He suddenly stopped, his body going rigid as his ears perked up. A low growl rumbled from his throat, a sound I had rarely heard from him. My grip on the leash tightened as I followed his gaze, scanning the area around us. At first, I saw nothing but the dark outlines of trees and parked cars. Then, in the shadows near a street corner, I saw him. A man stood completely still, partially hidden by the darkness. He wasn't moving, wasn't shifting his weight or adjusting his posture. He simply stood there, watching. My stomach twisted as I realized how unnatural his stillness was. He wasn't leaning against anything or pretending to check his phone. He was just there. I swallowed hard, trying to convince myself he was just another late-night walker. But something about him felt off. The way he lingered in the shadows, the way his head seemed tilted just slightly too much. I took a step back, tugging gently at my dog's leash, but he refused to move, his growl deepening. The man took a step forward, the faint light from a nearby street lamp finally illuminating part of his face. His features were obscured by darkness, but I could make out the faint gleam of his eyes, locked onto me. He didn't blink, didn't react, just stared. A chill crept up my spine as I took another step back. I forced myself to stay calm, to act like I wasn't scared. Maybe if I turned away, walked home like nothing was wrong, he wouldn't follow. But my instincts screamed at me that something was very, very wrong. My dog barked suddenly, the sharp sound breaking the eerie silence. The man didn't even flinch. My breathing grew unsteady as I calculated my options. I wasn't far from home, but if I ran, would he chase me? If I stood my ground, would he approach? Every second felt stretched, the air thick with tension. I shifted my weight slightly, preparing to turn and walk briskly away. As soon as I moved, the man took another step forward. My pulse spiked. He was reacting to me, mirroring my movements in a way that felt intentional. My dog bared his teeth, tugging at the leash as if he wanted to lunge. My hands trembled as I tightened my grip, my heart hammering in my chest. I glanced around, hoping to see another person, a car, anything that could break this moment. But the street was empty, the night stretching out around me in an oppressive silence. The man didn't say anything, didn't gesture, just remained in that eerie, predatory stillness. A part of me wanted to scream, to demand what he wanted. But I knew better. I didn't want to provoke him, didn't want to escalate whatever this was. Instead, I turned, forcing my legs to move, walking at a steady pace. My dog hesitated but eventually followed, his growls never ceasing. I listened carefully, my ears straining for the sound of footsteps behind me. At first, there was nothing but the soft click of my dog's paws against the pavement. Then, faint but unmistakable, I heard them, slow, deliberate footsteps following. My breath hitched, and I fought the urge to run. I reached into my pocket for my phone, my fingers fumbling as I unlocked it. I hovered over the call button, ready to dial 911. But something in me hesitated. What would I even say? That a man was standing still and following me. That he hadn't spoken or done anything yet, but I felt in my gut that he was dangerous. The footsteps behind me grew closer, and that hesitation vanished. I pressed the call button, holding the phone up to my ear as it rang. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice felt like an anchor, grounding me in reality. I think someone is following me, I said, my voice shaking. I gave them my location, describing the situation in as much detail as I could while keeping my pace steady. The dispatcher assured me that an officer was on the way. I nodded, even though they couldn't see me, my grip on my dog's leash tightening as I kept moving forward. Then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped. I risked a glance over my shoulder, my breath catching in my throat. The man was gone. The corner where he had been standing was now empty, as if he had never been there at all. But I knew what I had seen. I knew he had been following me. I didn't slow down, didn't let myself believe for a second that it was over. I hurried home, my heart racing, my mind replaying every detail of the encounter. The way he had stood so still, the way he had stepped forward only when I moved. It had felt like a game, a test, and I had barely escaped. When I reached my front door, I practically shoved my way inside, locking it behind me. My dog barked, pacing near the window as if still sensing something outside. I peeked through the blinds, scanning the street. Nothing. But I didn't feel safe. Not yet. The police arrived a few minutes later, their flashing lights washing over the neighborhood in harsh reds and blues. I explained everything to the officer, describing the man in as much detail as I could. He nodded, writing everything down, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "We'll patrol the area, but he didn't actually do anything illegal," the officer said. "It could have just been someone out for a walk." I wanted to argue, to tell him that no normal person stood completely still in the shadows like that, watching, waiting. But I knew it wouldn't matter. After they left, I double-checked my locks, keeping my phone beside me at all times. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every shadow outside my window felt like it was hiding something. Every small noise made me jolt awake. I kept replaying the moment I had turned around and seen him standing there. The next few nights, I avoided walking my dog late. I changed my routine, going out before the sun had fully set, keeping my phone in my hand at all times. But the uneasy feeling never left me. The thought that he could still be out there, waiting in the shadows, never fully went away. Story 7. I stepped into the Uber, shutting the door behind me as I reached for my seatbelt. Before I could click it into place, I heard the distinct sound of the doors locking. My breath hitched as I turned to look at the driver, a man with slicked back hair and a thin, unnatural smile. "Going somewhere special?" he asked, his voice smooth but unsettling. Something about the way he spoke made my stomach twist. It wasn't the friendly tone most drivers used, nor was it casual small talk. It felt like he already knew the answer, like he had been waiting for me. I forced a nervous chuckle and muttered, "Just heading home," hoping my voice didn't betray my unease. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, watching me instead of the road ahead. "Home, huh?" he mused, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Long day." His fingers tapped rhythmically against the dashboard, the sound filling the tense silence in the car. I nodded, shifting uncomfortably, suddenly hyper-aware of how confined the space was. The air felt thicker now, heavier with something unspoken. I stole a glance at the door handle, but the lock was still engaged. My phone was in my hand, but my fingers felt sluggish, unwilling to type or make a call. The GPS on the screen showed the route to my address, but we hadn't moved. "Could we get going?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. His smile didn't waver, but something in his expression darkened. "Of course," he said, finally shifting the car into drive. The vehicle rolled forward, pulling out onto the main road, but something felt off. He wasn't following the usual route. I had taken this ride enough times to know the turns, the stops, the timing of each red light, but he was going the wrong way. "Hey, I think you missed a turn," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. He didn't answer right away. His hand stayed steady on the wheel, his eyes flicking between the road and the mirror. Then, in a slow, deliberate tone, he said, "Don't worry, I know a shortcut." My grip on my phone tightened. A shortcut. There was no shortcut to my place. Every logical part of me wanted to believe it was a simple mistake, that he was just an odd guy with a strange sense of humor. But the tension in my gut told me otherwise. "I'd really prefer if you just followed the GPS," I pressed, my voice sharper now. His smile faltered, but only for a second. "Relax," he said, almost amused. "I drive these streets every day. I know what I'm doing." His fingers tapped again, steady, calculated, like he was counting down to something. The buildings outside grew unfamiliar, the bright city lights giving way to emptier roads. Panic started clawing up my throat. My pulse drummed loudly in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I need you to let me out," I said, keeping my voice firm. "I don't feel comfortable." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he exhaled through his nose, as if mildly inconvenienced. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Now why would I do that?" Cold fear settled in my chest. My hands were clammy, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. I glanced at my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. But before I could press it, he spoke again. "You don't want to do that," he murmured, his voice lower this time. "That'll just make things messy." His words sent a chill down my spine. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out. The doors were still locked, the handle useless. I could try to force my way out, but I didn't know if I was fast enough. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to think. "Look," I started, my tone softer now. "I don't know what's going on. But if this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." He chuckled, a deep, unsettling sound. "Oh, I'm not joking," he said simply. The car slowed as we approached an intersection, but he didn't turn. He just sat there, watching the empty road ahead. My hands clenched into fists, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything. The second the car came to a stop, I made my move. I reached for the door lock, yanking it up before he could react. My fingers scrambled for the handle, and just as I pulled it, his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist in a tight grip. "Not yet," he hissed, his nails digging into my skin. Adrenaline surged through me. I twisted my arm as hard as I could, jerking free from his grip. Without thinking, I kicked the door open, throwing my weight against it. The sudden force knocked him off balance for a split second, just enough time for me to scramble out of the car. I stumbled onto the pavement, my breath ragged. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to run, my feet pounding against the sidewalk. Behind me, I heard the car door slam, his footsteps quick and purposeful. He was coming after me. I darted toward a gas station up ahead, its fluorescent lights flickering like a beacon. Bursting through the door, I gasped for breath, scanning the room for anyone who could help. The cashier, a middle-aged man, looked up, startled. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. I whipped around, expecting to see the driver right behind me. But the doorway was empty. The street outside was silent. No car, no footsteps, no sign that anyone had been following me. My chest heaved as I tried to make sense of it. Had he driven off? Had he hidden somewhere nearby? The cashier frowned. "Do you need me to call someone?" he asked again, concern in his voice. My fingers trembled as I clutched my phone, still open to the emergency call screen. I swallowed hard, nodding. "Yeah," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please." Story 8. The grocery store was nearly empty, the kind of quiet that made every sound seem louder. I was pushing my cart through the produce section, debating whether to grab apples or oranges, when I felt a hand on my arm. It was a frail grip, but firm enough to startle me. I turned slightly and saw an elderly woman staring up at me with wide, fearful eyes. Her fingers tightened as she leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't turn around. Just leave now." Her breath was shaky, and her face looked pale, as if she had seen something truly terrifying. My stomach twisted at her words, and an uneasy chill ran down my spine. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how quiet the store had become. The hum of the refrigerated section droned in the background, but other than that, there was nothing, no distant chatter, no beeping registers. I fought the instinct to glance over my shoulder, but the way she was looking at me made me hesitate. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. My pulse pounded in my ears, and a deep sense of unease settled in my chest. The woman's lips trembled as she shook her head. "Please," she whispered, "just go. Right now." I hesitated, gripping my cart tighter, debating whether I should listen. It didn't make sense. Why was she so afraid? My gut told me that she truly believed what she was saying, but my rational mind fought against it, telling me this was just a confused old woman. The air felt heavy, like something unseen was pressing down on me. My palms were sweaty against the cart handle, and every part of me screamed to look, to see what had her so terrified. But I didn't. Instead, I took a shaky breath and stepped back. Slowly, I moved away from my cart, leaving it abandoned in the middle of the aisle. I kept my eyes on the floor, trying to act casual as I walked toward the exit. Each step felt sluggish, like I was wading through thick air. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my head. The sliding doors opened with a mechanical hiss as I stepped outside. The cool air hit my face, but the tension in my body didn't ease. I kept walking, not daring to slow down. The feeling of being watched was unbearable, like eyes were burning into my back. I reached my car and fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I unlocked the door. Sliding into the driver's seat, I immediately locked the doors and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My breath came in uneven gasps as I finally gave in to the urge. I looked back at the store. Through the large glass windows, the aisles were visible, shelves neatly stocked under the bright fluorescent lights. Nothing seemed out of place, but the uneasy feeling hadn't left. I scanned the entrance, expecting to see the old woman, but she was nowhere in sight. For a brief moment, I thought about going back inside, but the weight of her warning still lingered in my mind. Something had terrified her enough to grab a stranger and urge them to leave. That wasn't normal. I turned my car on and pulled out of the parking lot, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The store grew smaller as I drove away, but the tension in my chest didn't fade. I felt like I had escaped something without ever knowing what it was. Later that night, I couldn't shake the encounter. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering if I had overreacted or if I had narrowly avoided something I couldn't explain. I checked the news, expecting to find some sort of report, an incident, a crime, anything, but there was nothing. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman's terrified face, her urgent whisper echoing in my mind. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I had turned around, what had been behind me, and why didn't she want me to see it? The next morning, curiosity got the best of me. I drove back to the grocery store, my stomach in knots. The parking lot looked the same, cars coming and going as people carried out their groceries. Everything appeared normal, but I still hesitated before getting out of my car. Stepping inside, I expected some sense of familiarity, but the moment I entered, a wave of unease hit me again. The store was just as I had left it, bright, clean, ordinary, but something still felt off. I made my way to the produce section, glancing at the exact spot where I had stood the night before. My cart was long gone, but the memory of that moment felt as fresh as if it had just happened. I turned, scanning the store for the woman, but she was nowhere in sight. I approached a store employee who was stocking shelves nearby. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you know an elderly woman who shops here often? She was here last night. Small, gray hair, seemed distressed." The employee frowned, thinking for a moment before shaking his head. "We don't really get many elderly shoppers this late," he said. "I wasn't here last night, but I can ask around." Something about his response unsettled me even more. I thanked him and turned to leave, but as I walked toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach drop. Near the customer service counter, there was a security monitor displaying different camera feeds from around the store. My eyes locked onto one screen showing the produce section from the previous night. There I was, standing alone with my cart. I saw myself freeze, just as I had when the woman grabbed my arm. But she wasn't there. The footage showed me flinch, step back, and walk away, but I was completely alone. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, watching my own movements from the night before. There was no elderly woman. No one had touched my arm. I stumbled back, feeling lightheaded as cold realization washed over me. Had I imagined her? Had my mind conjured her up in response to something unseen? Or worse, had she been something I wasn't meant to see at all? I didn't ask any more questions. I left the store quickly, trying to shake the lingering chill that clung to my skin. As I got into my car, my hands still trembled against the steering wheel. I had listened to her warning, but deep down I knew the real question still remained. If she hadn't been real, then what exactly had she been trying to protect me from? Story 9. I stepped into the public restroom, relieved to find it empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the tiled walls. I chose the second stall from the end, locking the door behind me. The silence was a welcome break from the noise of the busy shopping mall outside. As I settled in, I heard the restroom door creak open. I wasn't surprised. Public restrooms were rarely empty for long. Footsteps echoed against the tiles, slow and deliberate. Whoever had entered didn't immediately choose a stall. Instead, they lingered near the sinks, the sound of running water filling the quiet space. I ignored it at first, assuming it was someone fixing their makeup or washing their hands. But something felt off. The footsteps didn't shuffle the way they usually did when someone was in a hurry. They paused, then moved closer to my stall. My pulse quickened. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A phone camera, slowly sliding under the stall door. My breath caught in my throat, my body freezing in place. The black lens was pointed directly at me, unmoving, watching. A chill ran down my spine. Panic surged through me, my hands trembling as I scrambled to stand. I kicked at the phone, sending it skidding backward across the floor. The sound of it clattering against the tile was sharp and loud. My heart pounded in my ears as I fumbled with the lock, desperate to get out. I shoved the stall door open and rushed out, my breath coming in short gasps. My eyes darted to the stall next to mine, expecting to see someone inside, but it was empty. The door stood ajar, swinging slightly from the force of my movement. I spun around, scanning the restroom, but no one was there. The sinks were dry, the air still. The only sounds were my own ragged breathing and the distant murmur of voices outside the restroom door. It was as if the person had vanished into thin air. I hesitated, my mind racing. Had they run out the second I kicked their phone? That had to be it. But I hadn't heard the door open or close. There had been no rush of footsteps, no sign of movement. It didn't make sense. Cautiously, I approached the stall where the phone had been. The door creaked as I pushed it open fully. Nothing. No phone, no belongings, no signs that anyone had been there at all. My stomach twisted in confusion and unease. I stepped back, suddenly feeling exposed. The walls of the restroom, once a place of privacy, now felt suffocating. I needed to get out of there. I turned toward the door, hesitating just long enough to listen for any signs of movement outside. Silence. Forcing myself to breathe, I pushed the door open and stepped into the bustling corridor of the mall. The bright lights and noise were jarring after the eerie stillness of the restroom. People walked past me, laughing, talking, oblivious to what had just happened. I turned back, half expecting to see someone rushing out behind me, but the restroom door remained closed. No one followed. The unease in my chest didn't fade. I had seen that phone. I knew what I had seen. Someone had been watching me. I forced myself to keep moving, my legs unsteady as I headed toward the nearest security desk. I needed to report what had happened. Maybe they could check the cameras, find out who had entered the restroom. There had to be an explanation. As I walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling as though someone was watching me. The crowd seemed normal, yet I couldn't shake the paranoia creeping up my spine. My mind kept replaying the image of that camera, the way it had slid under the door so smoothly. At the security desk, I explained what had happened as calmly as I could. The guard listened, his expression serious, nodding as I described the phone. He asked me to wait while he checked the nearby cameras. I sat in a stiff chair, my hands gripping the edge of my coat. Minutes passed, then longer. The longer I sat there, the more I doubted what I had seen. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe the phone had belonged to someone passing by, and I had overreacted. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The security guard returned, his brow furrowed. He looked unsettled. "We checked the footage," he said. "You went in alone. No one else entered the restroom until you came out." My stomach dropped. That wasn't possible. And I shook my head, trying to process his words. "There was someone in there," I insisted. "I saw the phone." But he just looked at me, his expression unreadable. "The cameras don't show anyone," he repeated. "No one else was inside." A cold, sinking feeling settled in my chest. If no one had entered, then who had been watching me? The stall had been empty. There had been no way out, nowhere for someone to hide. And yet, I had seen the phone. I left the security desk feeling more unsettled than before. The noise of the mall seemed distant, my surroundings suddenly unfamiliar. I felt like I was being watched, even in the middle of the crowded space. Every time I turned a corner, I expected to see someone standing there, smirking, holding a phone. I didn't stay in the mall much longer. I had lost all interest in shopping. I walked straight to my car, glancing around the parking lot, my keys gripped tightly in my hand. The paranoia lingered, a shadow trailing behind me. That night, I lay in bed, replaying everything in my head. I thought about the phone, the empty stall, the security footage that showed no one but me. The logical part of me wanted to dismiss it as a misunderstanding, but another part of me knew better. The next time I used a public restroom, I found myself checking under the stalls before I even entered. I watched the gaps between the doors, listening for the smallest sound. I had never been the paranoid type, but something about that moment had changed me. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that someone was there. Someone saw me. Someone wanted me to know they were watching. And worst of all, they had disappeared without a trace. Story 10. I stepped into the fitting room, the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. The store was eerily quiet, just the occasional creak of the old wooden floor breaking the silence. I had been browsing for over an hour, the only customer in sight, and the cashier had barely looked up from her phone when I took the clothes in to try on. The fitting room had 3 stalls, but I had taken the one at the very end. The mirrors inside were slightly smudged, and the overhead lighting cast a strange yellowish glow. I set my purse on a small wooden bench and hung the clothes on a single metal hook, the hangers clicking against each other. I slipped off my jacket and pulled a sweater over my head, turning to examine the fit in the mirror. As I adjusted the fabric, I heard a faint whisper, my name spoken just beyond the thin partition. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze, staring at my own reflection. At first, I thought I imagined it. The store was empty except for the cashier at the front. No one had entered the fitting rooms after me, and I hadn't heard any footsteps. A slow chill crept down my spine as I turned my head toward the partition, listening. "Hello?" I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening, stretching too long, making my skin prickle. I swallowed hard, forcing a nervous laugh. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was the air vents or my own paranoia. I shook off the unease and continued changing, slipping into another sweater. As I pulled it down over my torso, the whisper came again, closer this time. "I see you." The words were slow, deliberate, almost playful. My knees nearly buckled. I backed up until I felt the cold wall against my spine, my breath shaky. The whisper had come from the next stall, the one I was certain was empty. I crouched down slightly and peered under the partition, expecting to see nothing but empty space. Instead, I saw a pair of feet, bare, pale, motionless. My stomach lurched, and I stumbled backward, knocking into the mirror behind me. The sound of my own heartbeat pounded in my ears as I fumbled for my phone and my purse. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the screen, my mind racing with what to do next. I turned back toward the stall, my throat dry. The feet hadn't moved. Whoever or whatever was standing there had made no sound beyond that whisper. I willed myself to move, to do something, but my body refused. A slow creak broke the silence, and the stall door next to mine shifted slightly. A sliver of darkness appeared as it cracked open, just enough for me to see the faint outline of a figure standing there, barely visible through the gap. My breath hitched in my throat, and I took a step back, my phone slipping from my shaking hand onto the floor. The figure didn't move. It stood completely still, its presence pressing against the thin barrier between us. The air around me felt heavier, thick with something unseen but deeply unsettling. My eyes darted to my phone lying face down on the tile, the screen casting a faint glow. I had to grab it. I had to get out. Forcing myself forward, I snatched the phone, gripping it tightly. I barely had time to straighten before the whisper came again, closer than before. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was neither male nor female, soft but filled with something that made my insides coil. I lunged for the fitting room door, yanking it open with more force than I intended. The hallway leading back to the store felt impossibly long, and the empty silence of the store stretched unnaturally. My feet moved quickly, each step echoing on the floor as I forced myself to walk and not run. As I reached the front of the store, the cashier looked up, startled by my sudden presence. "Everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. I turned back toward the fitting rooms, expecting to see someone step out, to hear another whisper. But the hallway was empty, the fitting room doors all ajar, revealing nothing but hanging clothes and empty benches. I hesitated before answering, my voice unsteady. Was anyone else in the fitting rooms? The cashier blinked, confused. "No, just you." A deep, sinking feeling settled in my chest. My hands felt clammy as I turned back toward the fitting room entrance, half expecting something to be watching me from the shadows. But there was nothing there. No feet, no whisper, no presence. I forced a weak smile and nodded, pretending that I hadn't just felt something shift in the air around me. "Never mind," I muttered, grabbing my purse and making a beeline for the door. As I stepped outside, the night air was sharp against my skin, grounding me. My car was parked just a few spots away, and I wasted no time unlocking it and getting inside. The fitting room, the whisper, the feet, all of it felt unreal now, like a bad dream. Just as I started the engine, my phone vibrated against my thigh. I flinched before glancing down at the screen. A message. No number, no contact name, just 2 words. "Nice sweater. Story 11. I stared at the message on my phone, my stomach twisting. The number was unfamiliar, and I hadn't told anyone what I was wearing today. My fingers hovered over the screen as my mind raced through possibilities. Someone had been watching me. I forced myself to take a deep breath and think, maybe it was a prank, or someone mistook me for someone else. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. My blue dress wasn't anything special, but it was specific enough to make my skin crawl. I glanced around my apartment, suddenly feeling exposed. Had someone followed me home? I went to the window and peeked outside, scanning the quiet street. Everything looked normal, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave. I locked my doors again, double-checking each one. My heart pounded as I typed a reply, "Who is this?" The message sent, and I waited, feeling the weight of the silence in my apartment. The response came almost instantly. "No need to be scared." The words sent a chill down my spine. My grip on the phone tightened as my breathing grew shallow. This wasn't a mistake or a joke. Someone wanted me to know they were watching. I swallowed hard and set my phone down, forcing myself to stay calm. Calling the police crossed my mind, but what would I even say? A single message wasn't enough proof of anything. Still, I knew I couldn't ignore it. I tried to push it from my mind and went about my evening as best as I could. But every sound, every creak made me jump. I kept glancing at my phone, dreading another message. Hours passed and none came. Finally, I convinced myself it was over. Maybe it was just some random creep who lost interest. I turned off the lights and crawled into bed, determined to put it behind me. But sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, I stepped outside to head to work. As I reached my car, I froze. A single blue ribbon was tied to my driver's side mirror, fluttering slightly in the breeze. My pulse pounded in my ears. I scanned the parking lot, heart hammering. There was no one in sight, but that didn't mean anything. Someone had been close enough to leave it, close enough to know which car was mine. I ripped the ribbon off and got into my car, locking the doors the moment I sat down. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. Whoever this was, they weren't done. At work, I couldn't focus. Every time someone passed by my office, I flinched. I kept checking my phone, expecting another message. By lunchtime, my nerves were frayed. I had to do something. I considered telling my boss, but what could they do? Instead, I called my best friend Claire. Her voice was instantly concerned when I told her. "You need to go to the police," she said firmly. I hesitated but knew she was right. After work, I drove straight to the station. The officer at the front desk listened as I explained, nodding as he took notes. But his expression told me what I feared. "There's not much we can do right now," he said, voice calm but firm. "If they escalate, call us immediately." He advised me to stay aware, maybe even change my routine. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, I couldn't relax. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. I kept my phone beside me, half expecting another message. But again, there was nothing. Maybe the police visit scared them off. Days passed, and nothing happened. Slowly, I let myself believe it was over. I started sleeping better, feeling like I could breathe again. But then, just when I thought I was safe, another message came. "Red suits you too." Panic crashed over me like a wave. I was wearing red today. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. They were still watching. I forced myself to move, to act. I packed a small bag and left my apartment, heart pounding. Claire let me stay with her, insisting I wasn't alone in this. But the fear stayed with me. The next morning, I called my landlord and asked about security cameras. He hesitated but finally admitted there were some in the parking lot. I demanded to see the footage, and after some reluctance, he agreed. Together, we watched the grainy footage from the night before. At first, there was nothing unusual. But then, movement caught my eye. A figure stepped into view near my car. They were hooded, face obscured, but they moved with purpose. In their hand, a ribbon. My stomach churned. They tied it to my mirror, then lingered, staring at my apartment window. I couldn't breathe. I knew then that this wasn't random. This person wasn't just messing with me. They were waiting for something. I took the footage straight to the police. This time they took me seriously. They asked if I recognized the figure, but I didn't. They promised to increase patrols around my apartment. It was some comfort, but not enough. That night I stayed with Claire again. I barely slept, mind racing with possibilities. Who was this? What did they want? And how long had they been watching? The next morning I made a decision. I packed up essentials and arranged to stay with a relative in another city. It felt drastic, but my gut told me I needed to leave. Before I left, I checked my phone one last time. A new message had arrived. My breath caught in my throat as I read it. "Leaving won't change anything." Terror gripped me, but I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag and walked out, not looking back. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I knew one thing. I wasn't staying to find out. Story 12. I was leaving the gym when a man approached me and said, "You don't lock your car every time, do you?" His voice was casual, almost friendly, but there was something off about the way he looked at me. My grip on my keys tightened as I forced a small smile. "Yeah, I do," I replied, stepping past him toward my car. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few other cars scattered under the dim yellow lights. I glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed in the open space. The man didn't follow me, but I could feel his eyes on my back. My hands shook as I fumbled with my key fob and quickly unlocked the door. Sliding into the driver's seat, I locked the doors and started the engine. I looked up at the rearview mirror, expecting to see him walking away, but he was still standing there, staring at me. My stomach twisted as I backed out of my spot, making sure to keep my eyes on him. He didn't move, just stood under the flickering street lamp with his hands in his pockets. As I pulled out onto the road, I checked my mirrors again. He was gone. The drive home felt longer than usual, and I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. I told myself it was nothing. just a weird encounter with a random guy. Still, when I pulled into my driveway, I double-checked that my doors were locked before heading inside. The night was quiet, but I swore I heard something rustling in the trees nearby. I tried to push the encounter out of my mind, but the next morning I noticed something strange. There was a smudge on my driver's side window, like someone had pressed their hand against it. My stomach dropped as I ran my fingers over the glass. Had it been there before? I wasn't sure, but the thought of someone touching my car while I wasn't there made my skin crawl. That evening I debated skipping the gym, but I didn't want to let fear control me. I parked closer to the entrance this time, making sure I was under a bright light. My workout was rushed, my focus slipping every time I thought about that man. As I walked back outside, my pulse quickened. The parking lot was busier than the night before, but I still felt uneasy. My steps slowed when I saw something tucked under my windshield wiper. My hands felt cold as I pulled the small piece of paper free. Written in uneven, hurried handwriting were the words, "I was right. You don't lock it every time." My breath caught as I turned in every direction, searching for him, but he wasn't there. Heart hammering, I got into my car and locked the doors immediately. My fingers trembled as I started the engine, my mind racing. Had he been watching me? How did he know I hadn't locked my car at some point? I tried to remember if I had forgotten, but I couldn't be sure. I pulled out of the lot, constantly checking my mirrors, but no one seemed to be following me. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in my house made me jump, and I found myself checking my front door lock twice before going to bed. My phone sat beside me, but I hesitated to call the police. What would I even say? That a man had spoken to me once and left a note. It wasn't exactly a crime. Still, a gnawing fear sat heavy in my stomach. The next day I left work a little earlier than usual, the paranoia eating at me. I decided to stop by a nearby hardware store and buy a dash cam. If he was watching me, I wanted proof. The cashier chatted as she rang up my purchase, but I barely heard her. My mind was too busy replaying the past 2 nights. I installed the camera as soon as I got home, making sure it faced both the driver's side and windshield. The thought of catching him on video gave me a small sense of control. That night, I didn't go to the gym. Instead, I parked my car in my driveway and locked it twice. If he came back, I would know. The next morning, I checked the footage first thing. My hands turned clammy as I scrolled through the night's recordings. At 2:47 a.m., the motion sensor had been triggered. The screen showed a shadow moving near my car, lingering by the driver's side door. Then, for just a moment, the figure leaned forward, pressing his hand against the window. It was him. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I watched. He stood there for almost a full minute before walking away. I rewound the footage, pausing where his face should have been, but it was too dark to make out any features. My stomach twisted as I realized he had been here, just outside my house. This time I didn't hesitate. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained everything. An officer arrived within the hour, reviewing the footage with a frown. He asked if I recognized the man, but I shook my head. The officer took notes, promising to patrol the area for the next few nights. "If anything else happens, call us immediately," he said. That night I barely slept, every sound making my pulse spike. My front door was locked, the windows secured, and the camera running. Still, fear kept me wide awake. At some point, exhaustion won out and I drifted into a restless sleep. When I woke up, the house was silent. I checked the footage first thing, holding my breath as I scanned through the night. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the motion sensor triggered again. My heart pounded as the figure appeared on the screen, standing in the same spot as before. But this time, he didn't just press his hand to the window. He leaned in, his face inches from the glass. The grainy footage barely captured his features, but I could see enough. The wide, unsettling grin. The way his head tilted slightly, as if amused. Then, slowly, he raised a hand and pointed directly at the camera before vanishing into the darkness. I grabbed my phone and called the police again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. When the officer arrived, I showed him the footage. His expression darkened as he watched. "We need to find this guy," he muttered, "and fast." They increased patrols around my neighborhood, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. The man had been watching me, learning my routine. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew one thing for certain. He wasn't finished yet. Story 13. Working late in my office was nothing new. The building was mostly empty after 9 p.m., with only a few distant sounds from the custodial staff. I liked the quiet, the stillness that let me focus without interruption. The only light in my section came from my desk lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. I glanced at the screen, expecting a work notification, but instead saw a strange message. "Why are you still there?" The number was blocked, and a strange unease settled in my chest. I looked around, my office door slightly ajar, the hallway beyond dimly lit. No one should know I was still here. I typed a response but hesitated before sending it. Instead, I set the phone down and took a deep breath. The air felt heavier now, the office seeming too quiet. I stepped into the hallway and peered toward the main entrance. The cleaning crew usually worked on the lower floors first, so there should have been no one near my office. A chill ran through me as I scanned the empty corridor. Shaking my head, I returned to my desk and tried to refocus on my work. My phone buzzed again, and my stomach tightened. This time the message read, "Leave now." My pulse quickened, and I felt a tightness in my throat. I swallowed hard, trying to push away the growing sense of paranoia. Maybe it was a prank, but from who? No one knew I was working late tonight. I reached for my phone again, my fingers hovering over the call button, but stopped. Something felt off, something beyond a simple joke. I turned off my desk lamp, suddenly feeling exposed in the glow of my screen. The dim light from the hallway barely reached my office, casting eerie shadows along the walls. A faint creak echoed from the hallway, sending a sharp jolt through me. My chair made the softest scrape against the floor as I stood. I moved slowly toward the door, listening, barely breathing. I peeked into the hallway, expecting to see nothing, but something shifted near the far end. A dark shape standing too still, just beyond the reach of the light. My breath caught as I tried to make sense of it. The shadow moved, stepping back, disappearing into the darkness. My heart pounded, my skin crawling with the realization that someone was there. I turned back, grabbed my phone, and snatched my bag. I rushed to the main doors, my footsteps too loud in the empty space. The elevator was out of the question. I wasn't going to trap myself in a metal box. I pushed open the stairwell door, the air inside colder than it should have been. Descending quickly, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every small noise made my nerves tighten, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the ground floor, I exhaled, forcing myself to stay calm. The lobby was empty, the security desk vacant. That wasn't right, there was always someone here at night. The lights above flickered slightly as I hurried toward the glass doors. I stepped outside, the air thick with humidity. My car was parked a short distance away in the near-empty lot. As I moved toward it, I glanced back at the building, my stomach twisting at the sight. A figure stood in my office window, watching me. My body went cold, every instinct screaming at me to run. But the worst part, the figure raised a hand and waved. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I unlocked the door. Sliding inside, I locked it immediately and started the engine. My breaths came fast as I forced myself to look back at the window. The figure was gone. The room was dark again, as if nothing had ever been there. My pulse pounded as I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the lot. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for nearly an hour, my mind racing. Who had sent the messages? Who had been in my office? And why did they want me to leave? Finally, I pulled into a well-lit gas station, my hands still unsteady. I checked my phone again, scrolling back to the messages. They were gone. No trace of them anywhere. A sinking dread settled in my stomach. Had I imagined it? No, I knew what I had seen. I wasn't alone in that building, and whoever had been there had wanted me gone. I never stayed late at the office again. Whatever had warned me that night, whether it was a person or something else, I listened. Because deep down, I knew that if I hadn't left, I wouldn't have been alone much longer. Story 14. I checked my side mirror at a red light and saw the driver behind me filming me with their phone. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but when I looked again, their phone was still pointed directly at me. My stomach twisted as an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. The light turned green, and I pressed the gas, hoping they would turn in another direction. They didn't. The car stayed behind me, maintaining a steady distance as I continued down the road. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it some prank, or was there something more sinister behind it? I took a random right turn, watching closely to see if they would follow. They did. My pulse quickened as I realized this was no coincidence. I tried to convince myself that maybe they just happened to be going the same way. But as I turned again onto a quieter street, they followed without hesitation. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, debating whether to speed up or pull over and confront them. My phone sat in the passenger seat, just out of reach, and I regretted not setting up my Bluetooth for hands-free dialing. The road ahead was mostly empty, streetlights casting long, eerie shadows across the pavement. I took another turn, this time onto a more populated street with gas stations and shops lining the sides. If they were really following me, they would have no reason to stay on my tail now. I checked my mirror again and felt a wave of dread. They were still there. I spotted a gas station up ahead and made a sharp turn into the lot. Parking near the entrance, I turned off my car and grabbed my phone. My hands were clammy as I tried to steady my breathing. I glanced at my mirror and saw the car slowing down before continuing down the road. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Just as I thought I was safe, the car turned into the lot from the other entrance. My heart pounded as I watched them park a few spaces away. The driver remained inside, their face hidden in the dim light. I debated going inside the gas station, hoping the presence of other people would deter them. My fingers hovered over my phone screen, ready to dial for help. Before I could decide, the driver's door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face. He held his phone in one hand, pointing it in my direction as he took a slow step forward. My breath caught in my throat, and I forced myself to act before panic paralyzed me. I threw my car into reverse, tires screeching against the pavement as I backed up quickly. The man stopped, watching me, his phone still recording. I shifted into drive and sped out of the lot, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I merged onto the main road, constantly checking my mirrors, but the car stayed put in the lot. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere with people who could help if I needed it. I spotted a police station a few blocks ahead and made a beeline for it. Pulling into the lot, I parked and sat for a moment, trying to catch my breath. The station's bright lights and presence of officers gave me a sense of security. I checked my rearview mirror, expecting to see the man's car, but it was nowhere in sight. Maybe he had given up when he saw where I was going. Still, I wasn't ready to leave just yet. I decided to go inside and report what happened. An officer at the front desk listened carefully as I explained the situation, nodding as he jotted down notes. He asked if I had gotten a good look at the man or his car's license plate. I shook my head, frustrated with myself for not paying closer attention. The officer reassured me that I did the right thing by coming in and said they would keep an eye out. I thanked him and stayed in the parking lot for a while, not ready to be alone on the road just yet. After some time, I convinced myself to head home. I took a different route, avoiding any streets I had driven on earlier. The whole time, I felt like I was being watched, like eyes were on me even when no cars were behind me. When I finally reached my apartment, I double-checked the locks and pulled the curtains shut. I kept my phone next to me, ready to call for help if I heard anything unusual. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, I hesitated before heading out, afraid I'd see that same car waiting for me. But the parking lot was empty, and the street was quiet. I told myself it was over, that maybe it was just some random creep who had lost interest. But later that evening, as I was heading home from work, I saw it again. The same car, parked a few spaces away from mine, engine off. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I was being watched. The driver's phone was pointed at me once more. I didn't go to my car. Instead, I walked straight back into the building and called the police. This time, I wasn't going to wait and see what happened next. I had the officer's number from the night before, and I told them everything. Minutes later, a patrol car arrived. I peeked outside and saw the man's car speeding off before the officers could approach. They assured me they would increase patrols in my area, but deep down I knew this wasn't over. For the next few days, I stayed alert, checking over my shoulder wherever I went. My nerves were constantly on edge, and I found myself avoiding driving alone at night. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching. One evening, I received a notification on my phone. A message from an unknown number with a single attachment. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a video. A clip of me taken from inside that car, staring into my own side mirror. Story 15. The moment I walked into the Airbnb, I felt a strange sense of unease. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling in the back of my mind that something was off. The apartment itself was clean, modern, and well lit, but there was an odd stillness to the air. Shaking it off, I set my bags down and decided to settle in for the night. After unpacking, I wandered around the space, getting familiar with my temporary home. The living room had a cozy setup with a small couch and a television mounted on the wall. The bedroom was simple, with a queen-sized bed and a single nightstand beside it. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. I had read horror stories about hidden cameras in rentals, but surely that wouldn't happen to me. Still, my curiosity got the best of me and I started scanning the room. My eyes landed on the smoke detector position directly above the bed, and that's when the doubt turned into suspicion. Something about it didn't look right. It was slightly off-center, and the plastic casing appeared newer than the rest of the ceiling. I grabbed a chair from the corner of the room and stood on it, reaching up to inspect the device. As I examined it closely, I noticed a tiny lens peeking out from the edge. My heart pounded as I realized what I was looking at. Someone had placed a camera inside the smoke detector, aimed straight at the bed. A wave of panic rushed through me as I climbed down, my hands shaking. My mind raced with questions: who had put it there, and how long had it been recording? I felt exposed, violated, and suddenly the room felt much smaller than before. I grabbed my phone and started researching what to do in situations like this. Every article confirmed what I already knew: this was illegal and a serious invasion of privacy. My first instinct was to leave immediately, but I hesitated. If I left now, would the person responsible know that I had discovered their secret? I decided to document everything before making a move. Using my phone, I recorded the hidden camera, making sure to capture every detail. Then, I carefully removed the smoke detector from the ceiling to see if it was transmitting live footage. To my horror, there was a small blinking light inside, indicating that it was actively connected to something. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that someone somewhere could be watching me at that very moment. The thought made my stomach turn, and I quickly placed the detector back in its original position. I didn't want to alert whoever had installed it that I knew about their twisted setup. I packed my belongings as fast as I could, trying to keep my movements calm and casual. If there were more cameras in the apartment, I didn't want to make it obvious that I was leaving in a hurry. The idea of being watched made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to act normal. Once I had everything, I carefully exited the apartment, making sure to lock the door behind me. I didn't stop moving until I was outside and far away from the building. Only then did I take a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. My hands were still shaking as I pulled out my phone to contact the authorities. I reported the hidden camera to the police, providing them with the video evidence I had recorded. They took the matter seriously and assured me that they would investigate. Even so, the thought of how many other people might have stayed there without knowing haunted me. I wondered if anyone else had discovered the camera before me, or if I had been the first to notice. After handling the police report, I contacted Airbnb's customer support to report the incident. They expressed their concern and promised to take action, but I wasn't sure how much they could actually do. The thought of someone violating my privacy so blatantly made me feel sick. I didn't even want to think about what might have been recorded. That night, I checked into a hotel instead, making sure to inspect every inch of the room before settling in. Even then, I couldn't shake the paranoia that lingered in the back of my mind. Every shadow, every small object on the ceiling made me anxious. The violation had left a lasting mark, and I knew I would never feel completely safe in a rental again. The next day, I received a follow-up call from the police, informing me that they were investigating the owner of the Airbnb. They told me that hidden cameras in rental properties were a serious crime and that they would be taking legal action. While it was a small relief, it didn't erase the fear I had felt that night. Airbnb also responded to my complaint, stating that they had suspended the listing and were conducting their own investigation. They assured me that this kind of behavior was against their policies, but I couldn't help but wonder how many cases went unnoticed. It was unsettling to think about how easily someone could get away with something like this. Even after the incident was over, I found myself obsessively researching ways to detect hidden cameras in hotel rooms and rental properties. I learned about scanning for infrared lights, using apps to detect network-connected cameras, and checking for unusual objects in a room. It was frustrating that I had to think this way just to ensure my own privacy. Weeks later, I still found myself checking ceilings and suspicious-looking devices wherever I stayed. The experience had changed the way I traveled, making me more cautious than ever before. I no longer trusted the idea of staying in someone else's property without thoroughly inspecting it first. The paranoia wasn't something I could easily shake off. Looking back, I realized how lucky I had been to notice the camera before spending too much time in that apartment. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't discovered it sent shivers down my spine. It was a lesson learned the hard way, but one that I would never forget. To this day, I warn friends and family about hidden cameras in rentals, urging them to always check their surroundings. Most people don't think about it until it happens to them, but by then, it's too late. Privacy is something we take for granted, but in a world where technology can be misused so easily, it's important to stay vigilant. Story 16. I was waiting for the elevator when the man next to me whispered, "Take the stairs." His voice was low and urgent, barely audible over the soft hum of the lobby. I turned to look at him, but he kept his eyes fixed on the closed elevator doors. Something about his posture unsettled me, a stiffness in the way he held himself, like he was bracing for something. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open, revealing an empty interior bathed in dim fluorescent light. I hesitated, his warning echoing in my head, but I shook it off and stepped inside. The man didn't follow. He just stood there, watching as the doors began to close. Right before they shut completely, I saw him turn and walk briskly toward the stairwell. As soon as the elevator began its ascent, the lights flickered, and the car gave a sudden jolt. My stomach lurched as it came to an abrupt stop between floors. I pressed the emergency button, but no sound came from the speaker. I tried my phone, but there was no signal. The only thing I could hear was the faint creaking of the cables above me, stretching under the weight of the stalled elevator. A cold sweat broke out on my skin as I banged on the metal doors, calling for help. No response came from the other side. The silence was suffocating, pressing against my ears like the building itself was holding its breath. My mind flashed back to the man's warning, and I cursed myself for ignoring it. Then, something shifted above me. A slow, deliberate sound, like something moving across the elevator roof. I froze, straining to hear over the pounding of my own heartbeat. There was another sound, a faint scraping, as though nails or fingertips were dragging along the metal. It was followed by a low, rasping breath that sent a chill through my body. I stepped back, pressing myself against the wall, eyes locked on the ceiling. The air felt thick, heavy with something unseen but undeniably present. A single thud echoed from above, making the entire car shudder. My breath hitched as I fought the instinct to scream. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to get out, but there was nowhere to go. A metallic groan filled the air as the elevator shifted again, lowering an inch before stopping abruptly. My knees buckled, and I gripped the railing to steady myself. The emergency light flickered, casting erratic shadows along the walls. The air was growing colder, my breath now visible in short, panicked puffs. Then, from the speaker, a distorted voice crackled through the static. "Should have taken the stairs." The voice was guttural, barely human, as if something ancient was forcing itself to speak. I clamped my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sound, but it echoed through the small space, reverberating deep in my bones. A sharp screech tore through the air as the elevator jolted downward another few inches, stopping just as suddenly. I turned to the control panel, frantically pressing every button, but none of them responded. The walls seemed to close in, the space shrinking with each breath. Another sound came from above, this time a deep, slow scratching, moving closer to the hatch in the ceiling. Something was trying to get inside. Panic surged through me as I banged against the doors again, screaming for help. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with a sharp metallic pop, the hatch above me shifted slightly, tilting open just a crack. A thin, pale hand slipped through, fingers too long, too sharp, curling against the edge. I scrambled to the farthest corner, heart hammering in my chest. The hand twitched, testing the space, as if savoring the moment. A single black nail scraped against the metal, the sound piercing straight through me. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the elevator to move, for someone to find me. Then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the elevator lurched downward. The force sent me sprawling to the floor as it dropped in rapid jerks. My ears popped from the pressure, the lights flickering wildly. The hand above slipped away as the hatch slammed shut, sealing whatever had been there back into the darkness. Then, with a violent jolt, the elevator stopped completely. The doors slid open, revealing the dimly lit hallway of my floor. I scrambled to my feet, nearly tripping over myself in my haste to escape. I burst into the hallway, turning back just in time to see the elevator doors slowly closing behind me. For a brief second, just before they shut completely, I swore I saw a shadow move inside. I staggered forward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My hands trembled as I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead. My legs felt unsteady, like they might give out beneath me at any moment. I turned toward the stairwell, half expecting to see the man from earlier, but the hallway was empty. Somehow I made it to my apartment, locking the door behind me with shaking fingers. I leaned against the wood, trying to calm my racing heart. Every sound in the apartment felt magnified, every shadow stretched too long. My eyes darted toward the ceiling, half expecting to see that pale hand reaching for me again. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying everything that had happened. The next morning I took the stairs down, avoiding the elevator entirely. As I passed through the lobby, I glanced at the security desk, hoping to see the man who had warned me. The guard on duty looked up at me, eyebrows raised in concern. I hesitated before asking about him. The man from last night, he told me to take the stairs. Do you know who he is? The guard's expression darkened, his posture stiffening. What man? He asked. You came in alone. A cold sensation crawled up my spine as I took a step back. My mouth felt dry, the words catching in my throat. I knew I had seen him, had heard his warning. But as I turned to look toward the stairwell, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been trying to save me from something far worse. Story 17. I had been driving for hours, the empty highway stretching endlessly in both directions. The darkness seemed thicker out here, broken only by my headlights and the occasional flickering road sign. The radio crackled, but I turned it off, preferring the quiet hum of my engine. A pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, distant at first but growing closer. I kept my speed steady, assuming they would pass, but they stayed behind me. Then without warning they flashed their high beams, blinding me in bursts of harsh white light. I squinted against the glare, gripping the steering wheel tighter as the lights continued to flicker. The car didn't try to pass, it just stayed behind me, flashing its high beams every few seconds. My heart pounded as I tried to ignore them, but the relentless pattern made it impossible. Maybe they needed help, I thought, though it seemed unlikely. If that were the case, why wouldn't they just pull alongside me? A cold dread crept up my spine as the flashing continued, rhythmic and urgent. I considered speeding up, but the road was narrow, and I didn't want to risk losing control. My gas gauge hovered just above empty, and I wasn't sure how far the next town was. I had no choice but to keep driving, hoping they would eventually grow tired and leave me alone. The car suddenly sped up, nearly touching my bumper before falling back again. The flashing became more erratic, like some kind of frantic signal. My pulse raced as I checked my mirrors, trying to get a glimpse of the driver, but the lights were too bright. My hands were slick with sweat, my breath coming in short, panic bursts. This wasn't just an impatient driver or someone playing a prank. There was something deliberate about the way they moved, something that made my skin crawl. I searched the roadside for any sign of a gas station or rest stop, but there was nothing but trees and darkness. The idea of pulling over seemed like a mistake, but what choice did I have? My only other option was to keep driving until my fuel ran out. After another few minutes of the flashing lights and aggressive driving, I couldn't take it anymore. I slowed down, easing toward the shoulder, hoping that whatever this was would end once I stopped. The car behind me hesitated for a second, then suddenly accelerated. I braced myself, expecting them to stop next to me or try to block my car in. Instead, they sped past, their engine roaring as they vanished into the distance. My breath came in shaky gasps as I watched their taillights disappear over the horizon. For a long moment I sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but there was no signal this far out. A wave of unease settled over me as I thought about their behavior. If they were trying to scare me, why hadn't they stuck around to see my reaction? And if they had needed help, why not stop when I finally pulled over? None of it made sense, and the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. I forced myself to take a deep breath and continued driving, glancing nervously at my mirrors. The road remained empty, but the tension in my chest wouldn't go away. I just wanted to reach the next town, find a gas station, and put as much distance between myself and this stretch of highway as possible. 20 minutes later, I spotted a small roadside station, its flickering sign barely visible in the darkness. I pulled in, relieved to see another vehicle parked by the pumps. The place was old and mostly deserted, but at least I wasn't alone. I stepped out, stretching my stiff limbs as I glanced around. A man in a baseball cap stood by his truck, filling up his tank. He gave me a brief nod, but his gaze lingered a little too long, making me uneasy. As I swiped my card at the pump, I felt eyes on me again. I turned quickly, but no one was there. The gas station's office was dark inside, its windows covered with grime, but I could just make out the shadow of someone moving behind the counter. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned back to my car, suddenly eager to get out of there. The moment my tank was full, I climbed back inside, locking the doors before starting the engine. I glanced at the man by the truck, but he was gone. I scanned the parking lot, my heart pounding as I realized I hadn't heard him leave. His truck was still there, but the driver's seat was empty. My pulse thundered in my ears as I reached for the gear shift, ready to drive off. Just then, something caught my eye in the side mirror. A shape in the shadows near the station, standing completely still. It was too dark to make out any features, but I knew someone was watching me. I slammed my foot on the gas, peeling out of the station and back onto the highway. My breath came in ragged gulps as I forced myself not to look back. I didn't want to know if the figure was still there. The road stretched ahead, empty and silent, except for the sound of my tires against the pavement. I checked my mirrors again, half expecting to see the flashing high beams return. But there was nothing, just darkness. I kept driving, unwilling to stop again until I reached the next town. Whatever had happened back there, I didn't want to dwell on it. I just needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere with people and lights. As I finally approached the glow of city lights in the distance, a sense of relief washed over me. I had escaped whatever strange encounter had taken place on that lonely highway. But even as I merged onto the main road, a lingering unease remained. I would never know what that driver had been trying to tell me, and maybe I thought it was better that way. Story 18. I was walking home after a late shift, the streets quiet, except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. The dim glow of streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, stretching out ahead of me like reaching fingers. My footsteps echoed in the silence, the rhythmic tap of my shoes the only sound accompanying me. A car engine hummed behind me, its headlights casting a faint glow as it approached. It slowed down, rolling up beside me, keeping pace with my steps. I turned my head slightly, my pulse quickening when I saw the driver watching me. The man inside had a wide, unsettling smile on his face, his eyes locked onto mine as if waiting for a reaction. He lifted a hand in a casual wave, his fingers moving slowly as if he had all the time in the world. Then, just as suddenly he hit the gas, the tires screeching as he sped off down the empty street. I stopped in my tracks, my breath coming out in uneven bursts as I watched the taillights disappear around the corner. A cold chill crept up my spine, though I wasn't sure if it was from the night air or the lingering unease from that eerie encounter. Shaking off the feeling, I forced my feet to move, telling myself it was nothing more than some weirdo messing around. As I neared my apartment complex, I glanced over my shoulder, my nerves still on edge. The street behind me was empty, the quiet pressing down on me like a weight. I took a deep breath and quickened my pace, eager to reach the safety of my building. Inside, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to steady my nerves. The eerie smile of the man still lingered in my mind, making my skin crawl. I checked the locks twice before heading to my bedroom, convincing myself I was overreacting. Sleep didn't come easily that night, my mind replaying the scene over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his grin, his unwavering stare as he waved. Even when exhaustion finally pulled me under, my dreams were filled with shadowy figures watching from the street. The next evening, I couldn't shake the paranoia as I stepped outside for my walk home. Every passing car made my pulse race, my senses on high alert. I told myself it was just one random encounter, nothing to be afraid of, but my gut refused to settle. Halfway home, I heard an engine approaching from behind, slow and deliberate. My stomach clenched as I turned my head, my worst fear confirmed. It was the same car, creeping along the curb beside me. The driver's window was down, but this time, he didn't wave. He just stared, that same eerie grin stretching across his face, his eyes gleaming under the streetlights. My heart pounded as I forced myself to keep walking, pretending I didn't see him. The car inched forward, matching my pace once again, the tension unbearable. My hands balled into fists as I debated my options, my mind racing through every possible escape route. Then, just as before, he suddenly sped off, leaving me standing frozen on the sidewalk. I ran the rest of the way home, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I slammed my door shut behind me. My hands trembled as I locked it, checking and rechecking every bolt and latch. This was no coincidence he had come back, and that realization sent a wave of dread through me. That night, I barely slept, every little noise making my heart jump. Shadows played tricks on my eyes, every shape outside my window looking like a figure watching me. I considered calling the police but hesitated, unsure of what I would even say. The next day, I changed my routine, leaving work earlier to avoid walking home alone at night. I stuck to well-lit streets, keeping my phone in hand ready to call for help if needed. But even with all those precautions, the sense of unease never left me. Days passed without another sighting, and I started to believe he was gone. The fear slowly faded, though it never fully disappeared. I convinced myself it had just been some creep trying to mess with me, nothing more. A week later, just as I was starting to relax, a knock echoed through my apartment. It was late, far past the time anyone I knew would visit. My stomach twisted as I approached the door, peering through the peephole with held breath. The hallway was empty, the silence pressing against my ears like a thick fog. My pulse raced as I backed away, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay put. I waited for another knock, but none came. The next morning I found something outside my door that made my blood run cold. A single piece of paper, folded neatly, with only one thing written inside: "See you soon." I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I locked it, my mind struggling to process what this meant. He had found out where I lived. The thought sent icy fear coursing through me, making it hard to breathe. I called the police, my voice unsteady as I explained everything. They took a report, but without a clear threat or evidence of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. The officer advised me to stay alert and call if anything else happened. That night, sleep was impossible, my mind stuck on worst-case scenarios. Every creak of the building felt like footsteps, every gust of wind like someone whispering outside my window. I knew I couldn't stay here, not when he knew where I lived. By morning, I had made up my mind I was moving. I didn't care about the inconvenience or the cost, I just wanted to be safe. I packed my things in a rush, unwilling to spend another night in that apartment. A week later, I was settled in a new place across town, my address unlisted, my routine completely changed. For the first time in days, I finally felt like I could breathe again. But even as I tried to put it all behind me, one thought still haunted me. Somewhere out there, he was still watching. Story 19. I found the purse in the back of the thrift store, tucked between a pile of faded handbags. It was small, made of dark leather, with a delicate gold clasp. Something about it felt familiar, though I was certain I had never seen it before. When I got home, I set the purse on my kitchen table and unfastened the clasp. The inside smelled faintly of perfume and something else, something old and musty. As I rummaged through the pockets, my fingers brushed against something crumpled at the bottom. I pulled it out and unfolded the brittle paper, my heart picking up speed as I read the words. "Don't trust him." The handwriting was shaky, the ink slightly smudged as if written in a hurry. A chill ran through me as I stared at the note, my mind racing with questions. Who had written this, and who was him? Was it a warning meant for someone else, long forgotten in the lining of the purse? I turned it over, hoping for more, but the back was blank. My fingers tightened around the paper as an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. I checked the purse again, searching for any clues about its previous owner. The only thing I found was a faded receipt tucked into a side pocket. It was from a small cafe downtown, dated nearly a decade ago. Curiosity got the best of me, and the next day, I decided to visit the cafe. It was still there, nestled between a bookstore and a flower shop. The place had a cozy atmosphere, but as I stepped inside, the air felt thick with something within place. I walked up to the counter and ordered a coffee, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach. As I waited, I pulled out the receipt and glanced at the items listed: one black coffee and a croissant. A name was scribbled at the bottom, barely legible. "Excuse me," I said to the barista, holding up the slip. "Do you happen to remember who worked here around this time?" The woman behind the counter gave me a curious look before glancing at the date. "That was a long time ago," she said, shaking her head. "But I think the owner might know. He's been here forever." She gestured toward a man wiping down tables near the window. I approached him, suddenly unsure of what I was even looking for. He looked up, his expression polite but guarded. "Can I help you?" he asked, setting the rag down. I hesitated before handing him the receipt. "I found this inside an old purse I bought. Do you remember anything about this name?" His eyes flicked over the paper, and for a moment, something shifted in his face. He handed it back quickly, his fingers tightening around the rag. "No, sorry, can't help you," he said, turning away. The response was abrupt, and my unease deepened. I left the cafe feeling like I had brushed against something I wasn't meant to. The purse felt heavier in my hands as I walked back to my car. I told myself it was just an old note, a meaningless scrap left behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. That night, I placed the purse on my nightstand, unable to bring myself to tuck it away. The note was still inside, folded neatly as if waiting for me to read it. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. At some point, I must have drifted off, but a sharp sound jolted me awake. My room was dark, the shadows stretching long against the walls. For a moment I wasn't sure what had woken me, but then I heard it again, 3 soft knocks at my front door. I sat up, my breath catching in my throat. My phone was on the nightstand, and I grabbed it, checking the time. It was just past 2 in the morning. I held my breath, waiting, but the knocking didn't come again. Slowly, I got out of bed and crept toward the living room. The front door loomed ahead, its outline barely visible in the dim light. I hesitated before peeking through the peephole, my heart hammering in my chest. No one was there. The porch was empty, the street outside eerily still. I exhaled shakily, stepping back, but as I did, something made me freeze. The purse was sitting on the coffee table, even though I was sure I had left it in my bedroom. A cold chill ran down my spine as I stared at it, my pulse quickening. I backed away, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe I had brought it out without thinking, too lost in my own curiosity. I grabbed the purse and shoved it into the back of my closet, telling myself I was being ridiculous. It was just an old bag with a forgotten note, nothing more. But deep down, I knew something didn't feel right. The next morning, I woke up with an uneasy feeling, my body heavy with exhaustion. I decided to return the purse to the thrift store, hoping that getting rid of it would settle my nerves. As I drove there, I kept glancing at it in the passenger seat, feeling like it was watching me. When I arrived, I went inside and set it on the counter. The woman working glanced at it before looking up at me. "Decided against it?" she asked with a small smile. "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a laugh. "Just wasn't what I was looking for." She nodded, taking it from me, and I turned to leave, relieved to be rid of it. As I stepped outside, I pulled my keys from my pocket, but my fingers brushed against something else. I froze, my stomach dropping. I pulled it out slowly, my hands shaking. It was the note, crumpled, slightly worn, but unmistakably the same. "Don't trust him." My breath hitched as I stared at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. I turned back to the store, my heart racing. But through the window I saw the counter was empty. The purse was gone, and so was the woman who had taken it from me. Story 20. I was at a concert when a man leaned in and whispered, "I've been following you all night." His breath was warm against my ear, sending a chill down my spine. The music was loud, but his voice cut through the noise, clear and deliberate. My stomach twisted as I turned to look at him. He was taller than me, his face partially hidden by the dim lighting and shifting colors from the stage. He had a slight smirk, as if he enjoyed the way I stiffened at his words. My pulse quickened as I tried to recall if I had seen him earlier. Had he really been following me, or was he just messing with me? I stepped back, blending into the crowd, but he didn't move. The moment felt unreal, like something out of a nightmare. I scanned the sea of people around me, looking for a friend or even a security guard. No one seemed to notice what had just happened. The band played on, the energy of the crowd undisturbed by my growing fear. I forced myself to act normal, not wanting to give him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone, pretending to check a message. I needed to find a way out. I started moving toward the exit, weaving through the bodies packed tightly together. The air was thick with sweat and heat, making it hard to breathe. I glanced over my shoulder, but he was gone. For a moment, I felt relief. Just as I reached the venue doors, I caught a glimpse of him again. He was standing near the bar, watching me. My chest tightened as I realized he had moved without me noticing. I pushed through the last few people and stepped outside into the cool night air. The parking lot was dimly lit, and I suddenly regretted coming alone. I had planned to meet friends, but they bailed at the last minute. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked quickly toward my car. My skin prickled with the feeling of being watched. I reached my car and fumbled for my keys, my hands unsteady. As I unlocked the door, I forced myself to take deep breaths. Maybe he wasn't following me anymore. Maybe he was just some creep trying to get a reaction. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors before starting the engine. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I glanced around. The lot was nearly empty now, just a few scattered cars remaining. I didn't see him anywhere. Relief washed over me as I pulled out of the lot. I turned onto the main road, my shoulders relaxing slightly. The streetlights cast long shadows, but everything seemed normal again. I told myself it was over. A few minutes into the drive, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. A black car, staying just far enough behind to seem inconspicuous. My stomach clenched as I realized it had turned onto every street I had. I wasn't imagining it. I took an unexpected left onto a quieter road, hoping it would keep going straight. But as I checked my mirror, the car followed. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the wheel tighter, my heart pounding in my ears. I sped up, trying to put distance between us, but the car stayed close. Panic started to take over as I considered my options. I didn't want to drive home, not with him following me. I needed to go somewhere safe. I spotted a gas station up ahead and made a sharp turn into the lot. The fluorescent lights buzzed above as I parked near the entrance. My hand shook as I turned off the car and reached for my phone. The black car pulled in a few moments later, parking near the back of the lot. My chest tightened as I saw the driver's side door open. The man from the concert stepped out, his expression unreadable. He had followed me all the way here. I quickly got out of my car and walked straight into the gas station. The clerk looked up, barely interested, but I moved toward the counter anyway. I pretended to browse the snacks, keeping an eye on the door. The man didn't come in right away. He stood outside, watching through the glass. My skin crawled at the realization that he wasn't in a rush. He was waiting for me to come back out. I turned to the clerk, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, can I stay here for a bit? I think someone is following me." The clerk's eyes flickered with mild concern, but he nodded. I exhaled, feeling slightly safer inside. Minutes passed, but the man didn't move. He leaned against his car, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. My heart pounded as I tried to think of what to do. I couldn't stay here forever. Then, headlights swept across the lot as another car pulled in. A group of people got out, laughing as they headed inside. The moment they entered, the man by the black car glanced at them, then back at me. Without warning, he got back into his car and drove away. My breath came in short gasps as I watched his taillights disappear into the night. I stayed in the gas station for another 10 minutes, just to be safe. When I finally got back into my car, I checked every mirror twice. The roads were empty now, no black car in sight. My grip on the wheel was still tight as I drove home, every shadow making me uneasy. I locked every door the second I stepped inside, my mind still racing. What would have happened if I hadn't stopped at the gas station? I didn't want to think about it. Sleep didn't come easy that night. For the next few days, I stayed extra alert, always checking my surroundings. I never saw the man again, but the feeling of being watched never really left me. Even in a crowd, I couldn't shake the unease. Weeks later, I went back to that concert venue with friends. As we walked past the entrance, I felt my stomach tighten. I glanced around, half expecting to see him lurking nearby, but there was nothing. Even so, I knew I'd never forget that night. The way his voice had slithered into my ear, the way he followed me through the dark. Some people disappear into the background, but others stay with you forever. Story 21. I jolted awake, my heart hammering in my chest. The house was silent except for the unmistakable sound of slow, deliberate footsteps on the stairs. I held my breath, straining to listen, hoping I had imagined it. But the sound came again, closer this time. I sat up, my pulse pounding in my ears. My friend's house was old, the kind where every floorboard groaned under the slightest weight. But I was alone, no one else should be here. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, unsure if I should call someone. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. My stomach twisted into knots as I stared at the handle, waiting for it to turn. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. I gripped the edge of the blanket, afraid to move. Minutes passed, stretching unbearably. My mind raced through possible explanations, but none made sense. If it were an intruder, why hadn't they entered? If it were my imagination, why did I still feel that heavy presence outside the door? Summoning courage, I slid out of bed as quietly as I could. The floor was cold beneath my feet as I crept toward the door. I pressed my ear against it, listening for any sound. The silence was thick, suffocating. Taking a deep breath, I gripped the doorknob and turned it slowly. The door creaked as I eased it open, my breath catching in my throat. The hallway was empty, bathed in the dim glow of the nightlight. The stairs leading down were still and undisturbed. I stepped into the hallway, my heart beat loud in my ears. Every instinct screamed for me to go back inside and lock the door. But I had to check, had to make sure I was truly alone. I moved cautiously, my bare feet making no sound. Reaching the top of the stairs, I peered down into the darkness. Nothing stirred, yet the air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. I flipped the hallway light on, casting a warm glow over the wooden steps. The house was still. I forced myself to descend, each step careful and hesitant. The living room lay in eerie silence, the furniture undisturbed. I checked the locks on the front and back doors. Both were secure, just as I had left them. I moved to the kitchen, my unease growing. The window above the sink reflected my pale, tense face. Everything appeared normal, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I turned abruptly, half expecting to see someone behind me. The room was empty, but the sensation of being watched lingered. I shivered, rubbing my arms as I backed toward the hallway. Maybe it had been the house settling, the old wood shifting in the night. Maybe I was overreacting. I climbed the stairs quickly, unwilling to linger in the open any longer. Back in the bedroom, I locked the door and crawled under the covers. My body was tense, every sound magnified by my anxiety. I closed my eyes, willing myself to sleep. And just as I started to drift off, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, methodical, moving just outside my room. My blood turned to ice as I realized something chilling. The sounds were coming from the ceiling. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breathing ragged. The house had an attic, but I had never checked it. My friend hadn't mentioned anything about it. The thought of someone or something moving up there made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, casting a beam across the ceiling. There was a small attic door near the far end of the hallway. I had walked past it before, never giving it a second thought. But now, it loomed in my mind like a dark secret. Summoning every ounce of courage, I slid out of bed and unlocked the door. The hallway stretched before me, silent and still. I forced myself to take slow, measured steps toward the attic entrance. My fingers trembled as I reached for the string hanging from the ceiling. I gave it a gentle pull, and the attic door creaked open. A wooden ladder unfolded, leading up into darkness. Cold air drifted down, carrying a faint, musty scent. I hesitated, heart hammering against my ribs. Lifting my phone, I aimed the flashlight upward. The beam barely pierced the shadows, revealing old insulation and wooden beams. Nothing moved, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was up there, just beyond my sight. I exhaled shakily and stepped back. Whatever was in the attic could stay there. I hurried back to my room, locking the door behind me. Sleep was impossible, but I stayed in bed, phone clutched tightly in my hand. Hours passed before the first hints of dawn crept through the curtains. The house remained silent, as if the night had swallowed the unsettling sounds. I rose, exhaustion weighing heavily on me. Determined to put my fears to rest, I waited until daylight flooded the house. Then, gripping a broom for courage, I climbed the attic ladder. Sunlight streamed in through a small, dirty window, illuminating dust particles in the air. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Old boxes, forgotten furniture, and a layer of dust covered everything. But then, my eyes caught something that made my blood run cold. Footprints. In the dust, a clear trail of footprints led from one end of the attic to the other. They were fresh, too fresh to be from my friend. My throat tightened as I followed them to the far wall. A section of the wooden planks was slightly ajar. Swallowing my fear, I reached out and pulled it open. Behind it was a narrow crawl space, just big enough for a person to hide. The air inside was stale, carrying the unmistakable scent of sweat and something else. Something rotten. Unworthy. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. Someone had been living up here, watching. Moving through the house at night. My hands shook as I bolted down the ladder and grabbed my keys. I didn't stop to grab my things. I didn't call anyone. I just ran out of the house, heart slamming against my ribs. The moment I reached my car, I locked the doors and sped away, hands gripping the wheels so tightly they ached. Later, when I finally called my friend, my voice shook as I told them everything. Silence stretched before they finally spoke, their voice hesitant. "That's impossible," they said. "I had the attic sealed last year." But I knew what I had seen. and deep down I knew whoever had been up there had probably been watching me long before I ever heard their footsteps. Story 22. I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid of my house taken from the street. The picture was recent. My car was in the driveway and the porch light was on. A cold chill ran down my spine as I flipped the photo over, but there was nothing written on the back. I stepped onto my porch and scanned the neighborhood, but nothing seemed out of place. The street was quiet, the usual hum of distant traffic the only sound. My hands trembled as I stared at the picture again, unease curling in my stomach. Someone had stood outside my house, watching, and I had no idea who. I went back inside and locked the door, double-checking the deadbolt. The rational part of me wanted to brush it off as some kind of mistake or prank. But the way the envelope had no return address, the way nothing was written, made it feel deliberate. I placed the Polaroid on the kitchen table and sat down, my mind racing. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow outside seemed darker, every creak in the house louder. I peeked through the blinds more times than I cared to admit, my pulse quickening at every passing car. Even after I finally went to bed, sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, I left for work earlier than usual, my eyes scanning the street as I backed out of the driveway. Everything looked normal, but my skin prickled with unease. At the office, I debated telling someone about the letter, but decided against it. Without any real threat, it would just sound paranoid. When I got home that evening, the second letter was waiting in my mailbox. My stomach dropped as I pulled it out, the envelope identical to the first plain. No return address. My hand shook as I tore it open, revealing another Polaroid. This one was taken from a different angle, closer. I swallowed hard and flipped it over, my breath catching in my throat. This time there was writing on the back. 3 simple words scrawled in uneven handwriting. I see you. A cold sweat broke out on my skin as I turned, scanning the street. No one was there, but the air felt heavy, suffocating. I rushed inside and locked every door, my heart pounding. This wasn't a prank. Someone was watching me, and they wanted me to know it. My hands trembled as I dialed the non-emergency police line, my voice shaky as I explained the situation. The dispatcher told me they'd send an officer to take a report. The officer arrived 20 minutes later, a middle-aged man with a tired expression. He examined the photos, his brow furrowing slightly. Could be a prank, he said, though his tone wasn't convincing. Keep your doors locked, and if anything else shows up, let us know. His words weren't reassuring. That night, I barely slept, every small noise making my heart jump. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a light, restless sleep. When I woke up, it was still dark, and something felt wrong. My skin prickled as I lay still, listening. Then I heard a faint rustling outside my bedroom window. I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. Slowly, I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I pulled up the camera. I hesitated before opening the blinds just a sliver. The yard was bathed in dim moonlight, the fence casting long shadows. At first I saw nothing, then movement near the tree line. A figure stood just beyond the glow of the street lamp, motionless. My breath hitched as I fumbled to take a picture, but my hand was shaking too badly. The figure lingered for a moment before stepping back into the darkness. I forced myself to dial 911, my voice barely above a whisper as I told them someone was outside. The police arrived within minutes, but by then the figure was gone. They searched the yard, shining flashlights into the trees, but found nothing. I could have been an animal, one of the officers suggested, though I saw the doubt in his eyes. They took another report and promised extra patrols in the area. The next morning, exhaustion clung to me as I stepped onto the porch. My stomach twisted when I saw another envelope lying on the welcome mat. I picked it up with numb fingers, my pulse racing. Inside was another Polaroid. This one was taken at night, my bedroom window, the curtains slightly parted. I flipped it over with a sick feeling in my stomach. You left them open. My breath caught in my throat as I staggered back inside, locking the door behind me. They had been watching me last night. They had seen me look. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. I called the police again, my voice shaking. When they arrived, I showed them the new photo, my hands barely steady enough to hold it. The officer's expression darkened as he examined it. "Pack a bag," he said firmly. "Stay somewhere else for a few nights. We'll have someone watch your house." I didn't argue. Within an hour, I was packed and on my way to a friend's apartment across town. As I pulled out of my driveway, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. The street was empty, but I still felt eyes on me. The feeling didn't leave, even when I reached my friend's place. Over the next few days, the police kept watch, but no new letters arrived. A part of me hoped that whoever it was had lost interest, that leaving had thrown them off. Still, I couldn't shake the paranoia that clung to me like a second skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that last Polaroid. After a week, I returned home, cautious as I stepped inside. Everything was as I had left it, but the air felt different. I checked the mailbox with my breath held, but it was empty. No letters, no photos. For the first time in days, I let out a shaky sigh of relief. That night, I locked every door, pulled the curtains tight, and sat on the couch, exhaustion weighing heavy on me. As I reached for my phone, a sharp knock echoed through the house. My breath caught as I stared at the front door, my heart pounding. The knock came again, slow and deliberate. I forced myself to stand, creeping toward the peephole with my pulse hammering in my ears. My stomach twisted when I saw what was waiting for me. Sitting on the porch, just beneath the door, was a single Polaroid. My trembling hand reached for the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. I didn't need to. Through the peephole, I could already see what the picture showed. It was me, standing in my living room, taken from outside the window. Story 23. The theater was dark except for the glow of the screen, casting flickering light across the seats. I had settled in comfortably, ready to lose myself in the film. The sound of popcorn crunching and soft murmurs filled the space as the previews played. Everything felt normal until I noticed the man sitting directly in front of me. At first, I thought he was just shifting in his seat, adjusting for comfort. But something about his posture felt wrong, too rigid, too deliberate. His phone was raised slightly, angled in a way that didn't make sense. It took me a moment to realize the screen wasn't facing him, it was facing me. My chest tightened as I stared at the dim glow of his phone. He wasn't watching the movie. He was watching me through his camera. A cold, uneasy feeling crawled up my spine, and I forced myself to look away, pretending I hadn't noticed. I shifted slightly in my seat, testing if his phone would follow. It did. The screen moved just enough to stay aligned with me, confirming my worst fear. My pulse quickened, and my hands clenched against my thighs as I tried to decide what to do. Confronting him seemed like a bad idea. He was too close, and I had no idea how he would react. I glanced around, scanning the rows for an usher, but no one was nearby. Most people were too absorbed in the film to notice anything strange. I forced myself to breathe, trying to stay calm. My phone was in my lap, my fingers inching toward it slowly. If I could capture his actions, maybe I could show someone. But as soon as I raised my phone slightly, his screen went dark, and he lowered it. My stomach twisted. He knew that I knew. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me, but something about his stillness felt dangerous. I wanted to move, to get up and leave, but I was afraid of what might happen if I made a sudden move. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. I tried to focus on the movie, but my awareness kept drifting back to him. The tension in my body refused to ease, my instincts screaming that something wasn't right. Then, without warning, he stood up. My heart pounded as I watched him step into the aisle. He didn't leave the theater. Instead, he moved toward the far exit, lingering near the doors. The glow of his phone flickered back on, and I knew he was still watching me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to think rationally. If I left now, he could follow me. I wasn't sure if he was alone or if someone was waiting outside. My best option was to get help before making any moves. I leaned toward the person sitting beside me, a stranger, but my only hope at the moment. Quietly, I whispered that something felt wrong, explaining just enough for them to understand. Their expression shifted to concern, and they nodded slightly. They stood up first, pretending to stretch before making their way toward the lobby. I stayed put, waiting, my body tense with anticipation. A few minutes later, an usher appeared, walking casually down the aisle, scanning the audience. The man near the exit must have sensed something was off. Without hesitation, he slipped through the doors, vanishing into the hallway beyond. My stomach twisted as I realized he had been waiting for me to follow. The usher approached, and I quickly explained what had happened. They listened carefully, nodding as I described the man and his unsettling behavior. They promised to check the security cameras and have someone walk me to my car when the movie ended. I tried to focus on the screen, but the experience had soured everything. Every shadow in the theater felt ominous, every movement suspicious. My fingers twitched against my phone, itching to check the time, but I resisted the urge. When the credits finally rolled, I waited as the usher returned with another staff member. They led me toward the exit, their presence reassuring but not enough to quiet the lingering fear in my chest. The hallway outside felt too open, too exposed. As we stepped into the lobby, I glanced toward the entrance, half expecting to see him waiting. My breath hitched when I noticed a figure just beyond the glass doors, standing near the parking lot. He wasn't looking at me, but I knew it was him. The staff members noticed my reaction and quickly offered to walk me all the way to my car. I nodded, clutching my bag tightly as we moved through the lot. The man didn't follow, but he didn't leave either. He just stood there, as if waiting for something. I reached my car and quickly got inside, locking the doors immediately. The staff members waited until I started the engine before heading back. I hesitated for a moment, watching the man in my rearview mirror. Then, as if sensing my gaze, he finally turned and walked away. I let out a shaky breath, not realizing how tense I had been. Without wasting another second, I pulled out of the lot, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting him to appear behind me, but the roads were empty. The drive home felt longer than usual, my paranoia making every turn feel sharper, every shadow more menacing. Even after I parked, I sat in my car for a few minutes, my heart still racing. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed the moment I noticed his phone. The way he had waited near the exit, how he had stood outside like he was waiting for another chance. I checked my own phone, half expecting a message or missed call, but there was nothing. The next day, I reported the incident to the theater's management, hoping they would take it seriously. They assured me they would review the footage and keep an eye out for him if he returned. It wasn't much, but it was something. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I went out, I scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. The paranoia never fully faded, and I found myself avoiding movie theaters altogether. I never saw him again, but that didn't bring me any comfort, because somewhere out there he was still watching someone, and this time they might not notice until it's too late. Story 24. I was at a gas station late at night, filling up my tank before heading home. The lot was nearly empty, except for an older sedan parked near the entrance. I barely noticed the man approaching until he was just a few feet away. His clothes were worn, and there was something off about the way he carried himself. He stopped near my car and asked if I could give him a ride down the road. His voice was calm, but there was an unsettling edge to it. I glanced around, hoping to see another customer or an attendant nearby. The station was quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the gas pump. I forced a polite smile and told him I couldn't. His expression didn't change at first, but then his lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile. "I'll see you later," he said, his voice eerily casual. My stomach twisted as he turned and walked away, disappearing toward the dark lot behind the station. I hurried to finish pumping my gas, my hands slightly unsteady as I replaced the nozzle. My eyes darted toward the lot where he had gone, but I didn't see him anymore. I told myself he was just some random guy trying his luck and that there was nothing to worry about. Still, my instincts told me otherwise. I got into my car and locked the doors immediately. As I pulled out of the station, I checked my mirrors, half expecting to see him lurking nearby. The lot was empty, and I let out a slow breath, trying to shake off the unease. I turned onto the highway, eager to put distance between myself and that place. The road was quiet, only a few cars scattered in the distance. I tried to focus on the music playing softly through my speakers, but my mind kept replaying his words. There was something about the way he said it, so confident, like he knew something I didn't. I glanced at my rearview mirror, checking for any headlights that seemed too close. A pair of dim lights appeared in the distance, slowly gaining on me. My pulse quickened as I watched the car draw closer. It was an older model, dark-colored, similar to the one I had seen at the gas station. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but my grip on the wheel tightened. The car kept a steady pace behind me, never getting too close but never falling too far back. I switched lanes, testing to see if they would pass, but they stayed right behind me. My chest tightened as the realization sank in. This wasn't just another driver on the road. I took the next exit, hoping to lose them in the side streets. My heart pounded as I made several quick turns, trying to create distance. When I checked my mirror again, the car was still there. A cold chill ran down my spine. Whoever they were following me. I needed to get somewhere safe. I scanned the area for a police station or a well-lit place with people around. A small diner appeared up ahead, its neon sign flickering in the dark. Without hesitation, I pulled into the lot, parking close to the entrance. The car slowed as it approached but didn't turn in. Instead, it rolled past, the driver's face hidden in the shadows. I stayed in my car, watching as it disappeared down the road. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, debating whether to call someone. After a few minutes, I convinced myself to go inside the diner. The warm glow of the interior felt safe, a contrast to the cold dread still lingering in my chest. I ordered coffee and sat near the window, keeping an eye on the road outside. 30 minutes passed, and there was no sign of the car. I began to relax, telling myself it was over. Maybe it had all been in my head, just paranoia playing tricks on me. I paid my bill and stepped outside, feeling a bit more at ease. As I walked toward my car, a shiver ran through me. A figure stood near the edge of the lot, partially hidden by the darkness. I couldn't make out his face, but I didn't need to. I knew it was him. I rushed to my car and locked the doors the second I got inside. My hands fumbled as I started the engine, my breath coming fast. The figure didn't move, just stood there watching. The same unsettling presence I had felt at the gas station now surrounded me again. I backed out quickly, not daring to take my eyes off him. As I pulled onto the road, I checked my mirror, half expecting him to be gone. But he was still there, standing in the same spot, that eerie smile likely still on his face. I drove straight home, my mind racing with what had just happened. I checked my mirrors constantly, but no cars followed this time. When I reached my apartment, I parked as close to the entrance as possible and hurried inside. I double-locked the door and peered through the peephole, my heart still pounding. The hallway was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed deeper, every noise louder than it should have been. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face in my mind. That knowing smile, those words that felt more like a promise than a passing remark. I forced myself to believe it was over, that I wouldn't see him again. But the next morning, as I walked to my car, my stomach dropped. A note was tucked under my windshield wiper, the paper slightly damp from the morning dew. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "See, I told you I'd see you later." Story 25. The chill of the early morning air hit me before I even opened my eyes. Something felt off, a strange heaviness in the room that I couldn't quite place. As I shifted under the covers, I noticed the faintest creak of wood from somewhere inside the house. My heart sank when I realized the sound wasn't familiar. I sat up and glanced toward my bedroom door, but nothing seemed out of place. The house was still, yet an uneasy feeling sat in my chest. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. But when I swung my legs over the bed and stood up, a draft curled around my ankles. Confused, I made my way to the hallway, where a faint breeze brushed against my skin. That's when I saw it, my front door was wide open. The sight sent a jolt of fear through me, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had locked it before going to bed, I was sure of it. I forced myself to move forward, checking the porch and the street beyond. The neighborhood was quiet, empty, as if nothing had happened. My stomach twisted as I stepped back inside, closing and locking the door with shaking hands. Something wasn't right, and I needed answers. I rushed to my phone and pulled up my security camera footage. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching unbearably long. When the recording started playing, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the dim glow of the porch light, was a figure standing at my front door. The person was tall, their face obscured by a hood. At first they just stood there, completely motionless. Then, with slow and deliberate movements, they reached for the handle and jiggled it. I watched in horror as they tried again and again until, somehow, the door clicked open. For several minutes they just stood there in the doorway, doing nothing. My skin crawled at the sight, my mind racing with questions. Why didn't they come inside? Were they watching me, deciding what to do next? The thought made my hands tighten into fists. Eventually, the figure took a small step forward, leaning slightly into the house. I could see their breath fogging up in the cool air. And then, without warning, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I stared at the screen, my entire body frozen. I replayed the footage, trying to find any detail I might have missed. There was something unsettling about the way they moved, like they had all the time in the world. No hesitation, no urgency, just patience. It sent a shiver through me as I tried to understand what had just happened. I checked the timestamp on the video. The person had been at my door at exactly 3:12 a.m. That was hours ago, and I had been completely unaware. The realization made my stomach churn. Someone had been inside the threshold of my home while I was asleep. I quickly checked every room in the house, searching for any sign that something had been moved or taken. Everything seemed untouched, but that didn't ease my fear. The worst part wasn't what they had done, it was what they could have done. That thought sat in the back of my mind like a weight. I called the non-emergency police line, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. The officer on the other end asked a few questions before telling me they would send someone over. I hung up and sat on the couch, feeling the cold creep into my bones. 15 minutes later, an officer arrived, his presence bringing a small sense of relief. I showed him the footage, watching his expression darken as the video played. He asked if I had any enemies or if anyone had been bothering me lately. I shook my head, but doubt crept into my thoughts. The officer inspected the door, testing the lock to see how easily it could be manipulated. He explained that some older locks could be bypassed with simple tools or even persistent effort. That made my skin crawl. Someone had been patient enough to get inside without forcing their way in. He suggested I change my locks immediately and consider getting a deadbolt for extra security. I nodded, already making a mental note to do exactly that. Before leaving, he assured me they would patrol the area more frequently for the next few nights. It was meant to be comforting, but it didn't erase the dread in my chest. After he left, I sat in my silent house, listening to every creak and shift of the walls. Sleep was out of the question now. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the footage, analyzing every small movement the stranger had made. The worst part was that I still had no idea why they had been there. Were they scoping out my house for a future break-in? Had they expected me to be awake, waiting for some kind of response? Or was it something more sinister, something I didn't even want to think about? No matter the answer, I knew I couldn't stay here without making changes. By noon, I had already scheduled a locksmith to replace the door handle and install a new deadbolt. I also ordered additional security cameras, wanting every angle of my home covered. Paranoia gnawed at me, making every small noise feel like a potential threat. Even after everything was secured, I couldn't shake the feeling that they might come back. The thought made my skin prickle with unease. I considered staying somewhere else for a few days, just to clear my head. But a stubborn part of me didn't want to leave, as if running would make it worse. That night, I triple-checked every lock before heading to bed. My security cameras were running, my phone was within reach, and a heavy flashlight sat on my nightstand. Sleep still didn't come easily, my body tense with the fear that I might wake up to find my door open again. Days passed, and nothing else happened. But the paranoia never fully left me. I checked my cameras every morning, always half expecting to see the hooded figure standing at my door again. The fear lingered like a shadow, making me question every unexpected sound. Even now, I still wonder what would have happened if I had woken up while they were standing there. Would they have run? Would they have come inside? That question is the one that keeps me up at night, because the truth is, I'll never really know. Story 26. I was waiting for the train when I got a text, "Nice shoes." I frowned, glancing down at my worn-out sneakers. The message came from an unknown number, and when I looked around, no one near me was holding a phone. My fingers hovered over the screen as I debated whether to reply, a strange unease settling in my stomach. The platform was mostly empty, just a few people scattered along the edge. A man in a suit leaned against a pillar, staring off into the distance. A woman sat on a bench, scrolling through her phone, but she didn't look up. I scanned the area again, my pulse quickening as I realized no one seemed to be paying attention to me. Another text came through, "Don't look so nervous." I gripped my phone tighter, my throat going dry. My eyes darted around, searching for someone watching me, but everyone appeared lost in their own world. The train wasn't due for another 5 minutes, and suddenly that felt like an eternity. I typed out a response, "Who is this?" My finger hesitated over the send button before pressing it. Almost immediately, my screen lit up with another message, "You should smile more." A shiver ran down my spine, and I took a step back from the edge of the platform. My breathing became shallow as I scanned the platform again, my skin prickling with the sensation of being watched. The man in the suit checked his watch and walked toward the stairs. The woman on the bench crossed her legs, still absorbed in her screen. No one was looking at me, yet I felt like someone's eyes were boring into my back. I forced myself to take a deep breath, telling myself it was just some prank. Maybe someone nearby had sent it as a joke. I typed another message, "Where are you?" I hit send, my hands shaking slightly. The reply came instantly, "Closer than you think." My heart slammed against my ribs as I took another step away from the platform edge. I turned in a slow circle, searching for anyone suspicious. The overhead lights flickered, casting shifting shadows across the tiled floor. My hands clenched into fists, my body tensing with an unfamiliar fear. The train's headlights appeared in the tunnel, casting a dull glow along the tracks. I exhaled, forcing myself to stay calm. Whoever was messing with me had to be nearby. I squared my shoulders, determined not to let them get to me. The train rumbled closer, and I felt a slight relief at the thought of leaving the platform. Just as the train pulled in, another message appeared, "Don't get on." My stomach twisted as the doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. People shuffled inside, taking their seats without a second thought. I hesitated, my foot hovering just above the yellow safety line. The logical part of my brain told me to ignore the message. It was just a coincidence. A sick joke meant to get inside my head. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. My fingers tightened around my phone, my body frozen in indecision as passengers moved around me. The warning echoed in my mind, and at the last second, I stepped back. The doors shut, and the train began to move, vanishing down the tracks. I let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish but also strangely relieved. Then, another message appeared, "Good choice." My blood ran cold as I stared at the screen. I turned on my heel, walking quickly toward the exit. The platform was nearly empty now, just a few lingering stragglers waiting for the next train. My heart pounded in my ears as I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, desperate to put distance between me and whatever was happening. When I reached the top, I glanced over my shoulder. The platform below was empty, but the eerie sensation of being watched hadn't faded. I stepped into the street, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped it in fear. I forced myself to look at the screen. "Next time, listen faster." A wave of nausea rolled over me as I read the words. I turned in every direction, searching for anyone who might be responsible. The streetlights cast long, empty shadows, but no one was there. I walked quickly, my body humming with adrenaline. I had no idea where I was going, only that I needed to get away. Every sound felt magnified: the distant honk of a car, the rustle of leaves in the wind. My fingers gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I checked my messages again, scrolling back through the conversation. The number was still unknown, with no profile picture or contact information. I tried calling it, but a robotic voice answered, "This number is not in service." My breath caught in my throat, my skin turning ice cold. A sudden noise made me jump, and I spun around. A man was standing beneath a flickering streetlight, his posture rigid. His face was obscured by shadow, but something about him made my stomach twist. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. He just stood there, watching. I turned and walked faster, resisting the urge to break into a run. My skin prickled, my instincts screaming at me to get away. Another message came through, almost home. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't told anyone where I lived. I broke into a sprint, my feet pounding against the pavement. My apartment was only a few blocks away, but it felt miles out of reach. My pulse roared in my ears as I turned the corner, nearly tripping over my own feet. The street was eerily empty, the windows of nearby buildings dark. When I reached my building, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I slammed the door behind me, locking it with trembling fingers. My lungs burned as I struggled to catch my breath, my back pressed against the wood. My phone buzzed one last time. "Sleep tight." I let out a strangled gasp, nearly dropping the device. My vision blurred with panic as I stared at the screen. I checked every window, every lock, making sure they were secure. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but there was no explanation that made it any less terrifying. I barely slept that night, every creak and whisper of wind sending my heart into overdrive. I stayed curled beneath my blankets, gripping my phone like a lifeline. When the sun finally rose, I checked my messages again, my stomach twisting into knots. The conversation was gone. There was no record of the texts, no unknown number in my call log. It was as if none of it had ever happened. But as I sat there in the morning light, I glanced at my sneakers, and a chill ran through me. Sitting neatly beside them was a single, unfamiliar shoelace tied into a perfect bow. Story 27. I was halfway through my shift when I noticed the missed call. My phone sat face down on the counter, untouched for the last hour. There was no number displayed, just the words "voicemail pending" staring back at me. Curious, I stepped into the back room and pressed play. The message started with static, followed by a low, rhythmic sound. It took me a moment to realize it was breathing. A chill ran through me as I listened, my own breath catching in my throat. The recording was slow and steady, as if someone were standing right next to the microphone. The longer I listened, the more unsettling it became. The breathing sounded familiar in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just some random noise or a wrong number. It sounded exactly like me. I ended the message and checked my call log, but there was nothing. No incoming number, no record of a missed call. It was as if the voicemail had appeared out of nowhere. Shaking off the unease, I deleted it and went back to work. Maybe it was a glitch, a weird recording error. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but the uneasy feeling lingered. That night, as I got into bed, I hesitated before setting my phone down. The silence of my apartment suddenly felt too heavy, too thick. I turned on a fan, hoping the noise would help me sleep. At some point in the night, I woke up to my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I reached for it, my fingers sluggish with sleep. The screen was dark except for a single notification: voicemail pending. My stomach twisted as I sat up and pressed play. The same breathing filled my ears, slow and steady. This time it was deeper, more deliberate, like someone was aware I was listening. I dropped the phone, my pulse hammering in my chest. My apartment was locked, my windows shut, yet the recording felt impossibly close. I forced myself to breathe normally, refusing to let fear take hold. The message ended with a soft click, as if the caller had finally hung up. My hands trembled as I checked my call history again. Just like before, there was nothing. I turned on every light in my apartment, my exhaustion forgotten. There had to be an explanation, some kind of prank or crossed signal. But deep down, I knew no one else had access to my phone. I barely slept, jolting awake at every creak of the building. When morning finally came, I felt drained, my body sluggish. I told myself it was over, just a bad night, nothing more. At work, I kept my phone on silent, too uneasy to check it. By the time my shift ended, I almost believed it had been a strange coincidence. But as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Dread settled in my stomach as I pulled it out. Another voicemail. My fingers hesitated before pressing play. The breathing was there again, slow and rhythmic. This time there was something else. A faint rustling, like fabric moving. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, a whisper. Just one word, my name. My hands went ice cold, my breath shallow. I whipped around, scanning the parking lot, but there was no one. Just rows of empty cars and the hum of streetlights. I got in my car and locked the doors, my pulse racing. I wanted to believe it was a trick, a bad joke. But who would go this far? And how were they recording my breathing? I considered calling someone, but what would I even say? That I was getting voicemails from myself. I doubted anyone would take me seriously. That night, I left my phone on the kitchen counter and tried to sleep. The fan roared in the background, but I still felt on edge. My own breathing felt too loud, too unnatural. Sometime past midnight, my phone buzzed. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to check it. I lay there, every muscle tense, waiting for silence. When I finally got up in the morning, my phone had another notification. My stomach churned as I played the message. The breathing started like before, but this time there was something else. A faint tapping noise echoed in the background, soft and deliberate. My heart pounded as I listened closer. It took me a moment to realize the pattern. It was coming from my front door. I dropped the phone and spun around, my breath hitching. The apartment was silent, the door shut and locked. I crept toward it, heart hammering, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No signs of anyone standing there, but deep inside my phone, the tapping continued. I deleted the message, my hands shaking. I needed to get out of there, at least for a while. I packed a bag and left for a friend's house, refusing to stay alone another night. At their place, I forced myself to check my call log again. Still nothing. No record of the voicemails ever existing. It was like they had never been there at all. I turned off my phone and left it that way, too afraid to see another message. I told myself it was over, that maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But late that night, something woke me up. A soft sound, barely audible over the hum of the city outside. Breathing, slow, rhythmic. It wasn't coming from my phone. It was coming from the corner of the room. Story 28. The park was quiet that afternoon, with only a few people scattered around. I had come to clear my mind, enjoying the crisp air and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. I found an empty bench near the walking path and sat down, stretching my legs as I watched birds peck at the grass. As I shifted in my seat, my hand brushed against something taped beneath the bench. Curiosity piqued, I reached under and peeled it off, realizing it was a folded piece of paper. My pulse quickened slightly as I opened it, my eyes locking onto the words written inside. "Look behind you." A chill ran through me, and for a moment I sat frozen, my grip tightening around the note. It had to be some kind of joke, something left behind to mess with whoever found it. Still, the hairs on my arms stood on end as I hesitated, debating whether or not to turn around. I exhaled slowly and forced myself to glance over my shoulder, my muscles tense. The path stretched behind me, lined with trees swaying gently, their shadows long in the afternoon sun. A woman jogged in the distance, and a man walked his dog near the fountain, but no one seemed out of place. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head at my own paranoia. It was nothing, just a prank left for someone to find, and I had fallen for it. Crumpling the note in my fist, I stood up, brushing off my jeans before deciding to walk around for a bit. As I strolled along the path, I couldn't shake the lingering unease. My mind kept circling back to the note, to the eerie timing of finding it when I was alone. I told myself it was a coincidence, but a small voice in the back of my mind whispered otherwise. The feeling only grew stronger when I noticed something odd. Every time I glanced around, there was a figure standing just far enough away to blend in. A man in a dark hoodie, his face shadowed beneath the fabric, never quite close but never fully out of sight. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous. The park was public and there were plenty of people around. It wasn't unusual to see the same person more than once. But as I continued walking, the man stayed within view, always lingering in the distance. I tested my suspicion by changing direction, veering off onto a smaller path leading toward the picnic area. My heart pounded when I saw him again, now standing near a row of empty tables, his hands tucked into his pockets. He wasn't jogging, wasn't walking a dog, he was just there. Panic crept in, and I reached for my phone, my fingers clammy as I tried to think of what to do. Calling someone felt dramatic, but ignoring my gut felt worse. I took a deep breath and decided to head straight for the parking lot, hoping he wouldn't follow. My steps quickened as I moved past the playground and toward the exit. The moment I looked back, my stomach dropped. The man was walking now, matching my pace, closing the distance little by little. I forced myself to stay calm, keeping my movements steady so I wouldn't draw more attention. As soon as I reached the parking lot, I scanned the rows of cars, cursing under my breath when I realized how empty it was. My car was parked near the far end, isolated from the few others still here. The distance between me and the man was shrinking fast. I broke into a jog, my pulse hammering as I fumbled for my keys. The moment I reached my car, I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, locking it in one frantic motion. My breath came in sharp gasps as I turned the key, my hands shaking violently. The engine roared to life, and I glanced up just in time to see him standing a few feet away. He had stopped, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed like he had all the time in the world. A sickening wave of fear gripped me as he lifted a hand and pointed at me. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. Slamming the car into reverse, I backed out so fast my tires screeched against the pavement. My heart pounded as I sped out of the lot, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The man didn't move. He just stood there, watching as I drove away. The whole way home, my mind raced through the possibilities. Was he the one who left the note? Had he been waiting for someone to find it? The thought sent chills down my spine, making my fingers tighten around the steering wheel. Once I reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me and double-checked the windows, my nerves still frayed. The logical part of my brain tried to reason with me, telling me I was safe now, that I had gotten away. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That night, I barely slept, every sound in my apartment setting me on edge. Shadows moved outside my window, but I told myself it was just the wind shifting the trees. Even so, I kept the lights on, unwilling to let the darkness consume me. The next morning, exhaustion weighed heavy on my body as I left for work. The fresh air helped clear my mind, but a creeping paranoia lingered in the back of my head. Every time I passed a parked car or turned a corner, I half expected to see him again. By the time I arrived at my office, I had almost convinced myself it had been a random, unsettling encounter. But as I approached the entrance, something caught my eye. Taped to the glass door was a single piece of paper, the words scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Did you look behind you?" My breath caught in my throat, my fingers trembling as I reached for the note. The street around me was busy. People walking by, cars passing, life moving as if nothing was wrong. But to me, the world had just narrowed into one terrifying realization. He knew where I worked. Story 29. I was sitting alone at the diner, my plate of fries growing cold as I absent-mindedly poked at them with my fork. The soft hum of the jukebox mixed with the clink of silverware, and the occasional murmur of other patrons, but none of it seemed to reach me. I'd just finished a long day, and the solitude of the small diner was all I needed to unwind. I glanced out the window, not expecting anything out of the ordinary, but my gaze met a pair of eyes staring back at me. A man was standing on the sidewalk, just outside the diner, his face partially obscured by the fog glass. His gaze was fixed directly on me, his eyes dark and unblinking. For a moment, I thought it might be some strange coincidence, maybe he was looking past me at something else. But no, his focus didn't shift. He was staring at me, and my stomach tightened. Before I could look away, the waiter approached, his face slightly strained, though he wore his usual friendly smile. "Is that man outside your boyfriend?" he asked casually, his voice soft enough that only I could hear. His tone was almost too casual for the situation, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "He's been staring at you through the window for a while." I blinked, caught off guard. "No," I said, my voice coming out a little sharper than I meant it to. "I don't know who he is." My heart rate increased as I turned back toward the window. The man was still standing there, his posture rigid, his eyes never leaving mine. I tried to focus on my fries, forcing my hands to stop trembling. I wasn't one to get easily spooked, but the way he was looking at me, there was something unsettling about it. It was like he knew me, like he was waiting for me to do something, anything. I glanced back at the waiter, who had noticed the shift in my expression. "Do you want me to call the cops?" he asked quietly. I considered it for a moment, but something about the situation held me back. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe it was just a weird coincidence, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, and the longer I looked, the more anxious I became. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'll be fine. Just keep an eye on him." The waiter gave me a nod, clearly still concerned, but he backed away, leaving me alone with the strange feeling gnawing at my gut. I tried to go back to my meal, but I couldn't stop glancing up at the window. The man hadn't moved an inch, still staring intently at me. The longer I sat there, the more suffocating the silence in the diner became. The normal chatter around me felt distant, almost like it was coming from another world. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, it was hard to tell in the dim light. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, even when I wasn't looking directly at him. I thought about leaving, but something told me that wouldn't solve anything. If he was waiting for me to leave, then I was just playing into whatever game he was trying to play. Finally, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and moved toward the door. I wasn't sure what I planned to do, but I couldn't sit there any longer. The waiter was at the counter, and when he saw me walking toward the door, his eyes widened. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. I nodded, trying to keep my composure, but I could feel the tension in my body. The man outside hadn't moved an inch, and now I was closer to the door. I could see him more clearly. His clothes were nondescript, and his hair was dark and unkempt. His face was pale, almost sickly looking, and I couldn't help but shiver as I got closer. I reached for the handle, but before I could open it, the bell above the door rang, and a new customer walked in. I froze, my hand still on the door, and I glanced at the man outside once more. To my horror, he turned his head slightly, just enough to follow the new person's entrance, but then his eyes snapped back to me. It was like he was waiting for something. I felt a wave of panic rush over me, my breath catching in my throat. I was stuck in a cycle of looking at him, then looking away, my eyes darting back and forth between the door and the man on the sidewalk. I stepped back from the door, my fingers trembling as I fumbled with my phone. "Maybe I should call the cops," I muttered under my breath. But as I looked down at my phone, I realized I couldn't. The screen wouldn't turn on. I pressed the power button again and again, but the device remained black. I cursed under my breath, my frustration mounting. Just then, the man outside began to move. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer to the door. My pulse raced as I stepped back, my body instinctively pulling me away from the window. I didn't know what he was doing, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. The door jingled as he pushed it open, a bell ringing overhead. My heart nearly stopped when I heard the soft click of his boots against the floor. The man had entered the diner. I turned quickly, backing toward the back of the room. The waiter noticed my alarmed expression and began to walk toward me. "Is everything okay?" he asked, but his voice sounded distant, muffled as I tried to make sense of the situation. The man wasn't looking at me anymore. Instead, he was scanning the room, his gaze settling on the other customers as if he was searching for something, someone. I swallowed hard, fear creeping up my spine. The man's gaze flicked to the waiter, then back to me. He smiled, a slow, chilling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I think I found her," he said, his voice cold and smooth. I froze, my blood running cold. What the hell was happening? "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. Story 30. I got a call from an unknown number. The sudden ring startled me, cutting through the silence of my apartment. I had been sitting alone, staring at the blank screen of my phone, not expecting any calls at this hour. I hesitated for a moment before answering, thinking it was probably just a telemarketer or a wrong number. The voice on the other end was low and raspy, almost a whisper. "Don't go home," it said, the words chilling and deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't recognize the voice, and yet something about it felt too familiar, like it knew something I didn't. I froze, not knowing how to respond. I wanted to ask who it was, to demand an explanation, but the words didn't come. My throat felt tight as I glanced toward the door of my apartment. half expecting someone to be standing on the other side, watching me. There was nothing, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city below. I held my breath, listening for any sign that the voice would speak again. But it didn't. The call ended abruptly, leaving only silence in its wake. I stared at my phone screen, the empty void where the call had come from. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I quickly tapped the screen to redial the number. It was disconnected. I tried again, but nothing, just the irritating beep of a non-existent line. I sat there, unable to shake the unsettling feeling that had settled over me. It wasn't just the cryptic message, it was the way the voice had sounded, so urgent, so sure. I looked around my apartment, trying to ignore the creeping sensation that something wasn't right. I had been living here for almost a year, but tonight the walls felt too close, the corners too dark. I stood up and walked to the window, hoping the night air would clear my head. The city stretched out below me, a sea of lights in motion. Nothing unusual. No sign of anyone lingering in the streets below, no car parked outside my building. Everything seemed normal, but the voice still echoed in my mind, looping over and over. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That some anonymous caller told me not to go home. They'd think I was overreacting, or worse, that I was imagining things. It was probably just a prank, I reasoned. People did weird things all the time, and I had no way of knowing if this was even meant for me. Still, the thought of going home, or, more accurately, leaving my apartment, sent a wave of anxiety through me. What if someone was waiting for me outside? What if someone knew where I was, knew I'd be walking down that same street at that exact moment? I pushed the thoughts aside, trying to focus on the present, but they wouldn't let go. I paced back and forth, my mind running in circles. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking. But then I noticed something odd, a small, almost imperceptible movement near the door. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but as I looked closer, I realized that the shadow under the door was shifting. I wasn't imagining it. My heart began to race, and I crept toward the door, trying not to make a sound. I stood still, pressing my ear against the wood, straining to hear any sounds on the other side. The silence was deafening. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no whispers. I slowly stepped back, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. I grabbed my phone again, this time scrolling through my contacts for anyone who might be able to reassure me. But as my thumb hovered over my best friend's name, I realized something else. I didn't want to disturb anyone. I didn't want to sound paranoid. What if this was all just a coincidence? What if I was overreacting? Still, my thoughts kept spiraling back to the voice the way it had warned me. Without thinking, I walked toward the door and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. It was as if something was pushing me forward, an instinct I couldn't ignore. I wasn't going to just sit here and wait for whatever might happen. If someone was out there, if someone had really been watching me, I needed to take control. I stepped out into the hallway, the familiar hum of the building's old lights above me. My footsteps echoed down the narrow hall, and for the first time I noticed how empty it felt, like I was the only one left in the building. It wasn't late, but the halls were eerily quiet. I felt my breath quicken as I approached the stairwell. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I descended the stairs, every creak of the steps seemed to come from someone else. Every shift in the air felt like it was meant to make me look over my shoulder. But when I reached the bottom, I saw nothing, just the lobby still quiet and empty. The front door of the building was unlocked, but as I stepped outside, a strange calm washed over me. The cool air felt sharp against my skin, and for a moment I thought about the voice again. Was it just a prank? Or was there something deeper to the warning? I stood there, debating whether to stay or go, when I saw something on the ground, something small and white, barely visible in the shadows. I bent down and picked it up. It was a piece of paper, folded neatly. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the words written in hurried, uneven handwriting. "Don't trust anyone. They're watching. Go back inside." I froze, my blood running cold. The message was clear. I wasn't just hearing things. Someone had been following me, someone knew exactly where I was, and now they were telling me to go back inside. I looked around, but the street was empty, the only sound the soft rustling of the wind. I didn't know who was behind it or what their intentions were, but I knew one thing for sure: I was going back inside. The hairs on my neck stood up as I turned and ran back into the building, my heart pounding. Whatever was happening, I wasn't about to face it alone. I wasn't going home, not tonight.